Last night a DJ saved my life. Last night a DJ saved my life. Yeah. Last night a DJ saved my life. DJ saved my life.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody had a great Labor Day weekend. Hope you had a chance to spend time with your friends and your family. And we are back. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I want to give a shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. It has been about a minute. We have so much to get into, ladies and gentlemen. This has been quite a crazy week, I think. First, I want to start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. Crazy things happened over the weekend. I don't know if I can keep up with all of it, to be honest with you. What's going on? Coe says your tax should fund free education and healthcare. It shouldn't go to another country that has free healthcare and education. I agree. I agree. Shout out to Topher says pathetic pet Bet David. I said pet. Ugh, Bet David. Greetings. Blockbuster says hi. Shout out to Karma says thank you. We're hoping you were able to screenshot all. It's time to wake up. Greetings, Orphelia. Oh, WW is on. Well, we're discussing her story. Ask her what she thinks of Operation Gladio and how we may have our own American version, but instead of NATO, it's the genocidal regime's agents working against USA inside the US. Yeah, I'm working on that to get her back on, but I am going to discuss her new article, which is pretty damning. You guys have got to hear this. Shout out to Lorez says, hey, Sabby, Eric, Corey, and RBN fam. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Did you see Thai Prime Minister removed? She got peace. That's all that should matter. Men are so sensitive. Greetings, Kermit. That taco nickname for Trump really died out. Before that, it was Daddy Trump. What's next? Greetings, Alf says PBD's interview of Kobe Bryant is peak brain rot. I heard. I didn't see that one, but I heard about it. Shout out to Mr. Moto So brings the heat. He brings the fire. He makes you weak with a strong desire. Can't you hear him talking, baby? Love him now or he'll go crazy. Shout out to Sarah says someone needs a cold shower. Greetings, Matthew. First discipline on my feet, packing the heat. Okay. Shout out to William says sup. Sup to you too, William. Greetings, CBC voter says happy Tuesday, Sabby and Eric. Shout out to Smoke a Guitar says all hail the Panthers. The Panthers. Oh ho ho ho. Shout out to Dan Rickus says good evening, comrades. Greetings, Lunatic says hi. No way Trump lasts. He will be forced out. Do me a solid, folks, if you haven't had a chance to do so, and make sure you answer that poll question. I'm curious to see how you feel about that. Greetings, Sakugo says, sup, y'all. Shout out to William says, sup, fam. We got a lot of sups in the house. And shout out to Mark Pusley says, Sabby. All right, we want to jump in. I don't want to keep you guys waiting because we have quite a bit to discuss tonight. Should be an interesting show. Tonight's theme is no rest for the wicked. No rest for the wicked. And I think you will see why. I think you will. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. You are doing the damn thing. You are holding down the fort. What? All right. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. Don't forget about the Sabsters. They're cool as hell. We also have Sabbies. Everybody here is cool. They're cool too. And of course, we also have a group called members. All of their names are listed here, folks, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker throughout the show. Hey, hey, hey. I want to give a special shout out here to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for ZK. We call them newbies. What's up, ZK? Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate all of your support. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you so much. Thank you, Brian. Sabby, you look wonderful always. Thank you. I was having a moment today. I had a bad hair day earlier on. It was just one of those days where I was just like, fuck it. I don't know. Sometimes it just gets one of those days. My ladies in the chat know what I'm talking about. The women in the chat know what's up. And shout out to Leroy says, Cage the Elephant, what's good, fam? What is good? What are we discussing tonight, ladies and gentlemen? It has been a wild week. Labor Day weekend was nutso, and we have quite a bit to get into. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the Whitney Webb shocking report. So I finally had time to read the new article that Whitney Webb has just released about these Epstein connections. She is now revealing who that person was in the Trump administration that is very well connected to Jeffrey Epstein. And I got to tell you, this guy is very corrupt. We're going to get into all of that. And the timing for this is fitting because on Wednesday, don't forget that Thomas Massie, who has been collaborating with Ro Khanna on this, will be apparently speaking to these Epstein victims. He is trying to get a vote on the floor to release those Epstein files. So it's just interesting. The timing is working out just great. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Donald Trump decline. Ladies and gentlemen, it is crazy out here. We have 2 different types of decline here. Now, everybody's talking about the health situation, but I want to talk about something else that just happened that I think is kind of sliding under the radar because there's been so much focus over the weekend on whether or not Donald Trump is alive. So this topic that involves Donald Trump's presidency has kind of flown under the radar. And I do want to make sure we shine a light on this. We're also going to discuss Pet David. I keep calling him Pet. Patrick Bet David. This is bad. Patrick Bet David debated anti-capitalist. And you know how passionate I am about these capitalism discussions. So we are going to talk about, there's 2 people that he talked to that I do want to focus on because I'm going to debunk some of these things that Patrick said. We're also going to get into big freaking news. Netanyahu's there on the thumbnail, and he is not liking this. The Genocide Scholars announcement. We're going to get into this report that was just released over Labor Day weekend about the genocide. It is now on record. And this is a big deal, folks. Big, big deal. And last but not least, this story just proves my point that the US government really does not care about us. The gentleman that you see there in the fourth square wearing the white hat, he is one of the people that was impacted. We are going to discuss this story that is circulating around, and a lot of people did not know about, how the U.S. military poisoned a Black neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. We're getting all into it, and that's not the only time that they have done this. We're going to show you other instances as well. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Tonight's theme again is no rest for the wicked. Make sure you answer that poll. Answer that poll. And if you haven't done so, go ahead and start us off right by smashing that like. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share like a Care Bear. Hey. Let's go ahead and dive into the first story. We're going to start off with this story. It was announced over Labor Day weekend. This is a big deal, folks. I don't know how you are feeling about the situation in Gaza, but I am here to tell you, getting this on record matters. It is really important. So over the weekend, the Genocide Scholars made an announcement that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Netanyahu doesn't like this, of course, but this is not something that I believe can be erased. This is going to go down in history, folks. Check it out. And a number of news outlets reported this. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. The world's top scholars on the crime say. The International Association of Genocide Scholars resolution backed by 86% of members who voted. So this is a big deal. Check this out. Out of the International Association of Genocide Scholars, 500 members, 28% took part in the vote. Of those who voted, 86% supported the resolution. The resolution states that Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide in Article 2 of the United Nations Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, 1948. Ladies and gentlemen, notice what they are saying here. Policies and actions. So it's not just Israel's actions, it's also their policies. This is very damning. This is very important. I tweeted this out over the weekend and I said, tag every politician or tag your representative who is still refusing to call it a genocide. And that's Republicans and Democrats. That includes Bernie Sanders too. Because I'm really waiting to see the next interview that Bernie Sanders has. If he's asked this question again, whether or not it's a genocide, I'm waiting to see if he's probably going to say no. And if he says no, if the person who is interviewing him pushes back and says, well, the genocide scholars just ruled that it is. So pay attention, folks. Again, it should be 100% of the vote, but still, that's a big deal. It is a 3-page resolution. It was passed by the body, calls on Israel to immediately cease all acts that constitute genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity against Palestinians in Gaza. Now, this includes deliberate attacks against and killing of civilians, including children, starvation, deprivation of humanitarian aid, water, fuel, and other items essential to the survival of the population, sexual and reproductive violence, and forced displacement of the population. You know why this is really damning? Because all this time that Israel said, well, Hamas committed sexual violence on October 7th, now you have it in writing that the genocide scholars are acknowledging that it is Israel that has been committing the sexual violent acts. When I tell you the world is turned against Israel, believe me, the world is turned against Israel. There's no coming back from this. None of it. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to go onto these podcasts, because he knows what's coming. The resolution said the IAGS recognized that since the horrific Hamas-led attack of October 7th, which itself constitutes international crimes, the government of Israel had engaged in systemic and widespread crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide, including indiscriminate and deliberate attacks against the civilian and the civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, homes, and commercial buildings of Gaza. Now, I will issue a correction here. Again, this started before October 7th. They have been brutalizing Palestinians in Gaza long before October 7th, including mowing the lawn. Also, of course, this doesn't include the West Bank, what they've done to people there. So I do want to add that. Also, when they talk about international crimes, don't forget that international law does say that occupied people have the right to resist with arms. So we got to point that out. Goes on to say here, Melanie O'Brien, the IAGS president and professor of international law at the University of Western Australia, said the resolution was a definite statement from experts in the field of genocide studies that what is going on the ground in Gaza is genocide. Now, if you've been watching this show and others that have been covering this for the past 2 years, and for some even longer than that, you already knew that, but now it's on record. And it wasn't just The Guardian that reported this. Multiple news outlets reported this. There's no coming back from it. None whatsoever, ladies and gents. Now, why is this also important? There was a recent statement from Donald Trump. Again, I think Donald Trump is posturing here. But this statement from Donald Trump says something as well. Trump says ongoing war in Gaza is hurting Israel in the court of public opinion. Let's get into this a little bit here. Donald Trump said in an interview released Monday that Israel may be winning the Gaza war, but they're not winning the world of public relations. His comments echoed ones he made several times last year during the presidential campaign, but he has not repeated the argument since the returning of office in January. He has recently begun reiterating his beliefs that Israel needs to end the war quickly and told the Daily Caller they're going to have to get that war over with. It is hurting Israel. So, and this is why I say, he's basically posturing here, because Donald Trump saying that the war in Gaza is hurting Israel in the court of public opinion, it's almost, he's saying this as though he has nothing to do with it. Israel could not continue their slaughter of the Palestinian people if it's not for the weapons from the United States. So Donald Trump is complicit, but he's saying this to make it seem like this is all Israel and he's not involved. Think about that for a second, right? But that is him sending an alarm because he knows what people are saying, and including people who were Trump supporters also speaking out against this. And I want to show you the transition of Gaza. We're going to see what Gaza used to look like and what it looks like today. Check this out. So you see the difference? You see how we went from this to this? Yeah. Yeah, that's insane. That's insane. What has happened to Gaza. And if that happened anywhere here, we would all be, everyone would be up in arms about it. But there is hope. And I'm very excited about this. The Freedom Flotilla, they have launched probably the biggest mission that I've seen thus far, where 50 ships are on their way to Gaza. Aboard those ships include, once again, Greta Thunberg. And this time it appears actress Susan Sarandon is aboard one of those ships as well. Check this out, guys. Now, I want to see what Israel does here. I want to see how Israel stops this, because it's not one ship, it's 50 ships. They departed from Spain over the weekend.
So, Greta, we're about to leave. Obviously, we had a brief delay because of the weather yesterday. How are you feeling?
We are all feeling so relieved and excited to finally be embarking on this mission that we have been planning for day and night now for what feels like forever. And we are overwhelmed with the support from people all over the world. Yesterday, during the launch event, thousands of people filled the streets of Barcelona to show their support to the Palestinian people and to this mission. And this mission is an act of solidarity with Palestinians. The idea of sending dozens and dozens of boats came from Palestinians when we were talking with them last time during the Madeleine mission. So we are doing the bare minimum to uphold international law and to do our duty as citizens of the free world. And this is the biggest attempt to break the siege of Gaza ever. And we are mobilizing with people from all over the world. Now we're going to our first stop, which will be in Tunis, where many, many people are waiting to onboard dozens of more boats, and then we will be joined by dozens of more boats from Italy and then by Greece, and then we will be continuing towards Gaza.
All right. So it gives me, hope. It really does. It draws, of course, more attention to it. And I do have to, also say this. I am very surprised because I didn't know after October 7th, I didn't know if the protests would continue for as long as they did. I didn't know if these types of actions, the Freedom Flotilla would continue. It's continuing on and on. And we know what happened to Chris Smalls when he was aboard the Madeline and how he was treated by the IDF soldiers. But that did not deter this project from going forward. And that's the thing. They want to instill fear into you. They want you to be afraid to attempt to try to do something. That's why you see a lot of the censorship is coming around, right? Where they're trying to push forward legislation to basically punish people for saying certain things that are pro-Palestinian, right? You see they're trying all these different angles. Benjamin Netanyahu is doing podcast tours to try to, I guess, rebuild Israel's reputation. And I don't think that will ever happen. I think that Israel has basically dug their heels here and they're stuck. And this is what Israel will be remembered for. This is what they'll be remembered for. And that was their choice. That was their decision. And I just hope that, the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank and Palestinian Americans here as well, I hope they see that the world is with you. The world is not standing with Israel. The polls show you people have turned against Israel. And I actually think the number of people who've turned against Israel is probably greater than what the poll is showing you. So, yeah, that gives me hope. But it's on the books now. It has now been decided by those genocide scholars that Israel is committing a genocide. And, I say there's no rest for the wicked. There really isn't. Benjamin Netanyahu, and not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but the Israeli government, the Israelis in Israel who support the genocide, and most of them do, they're going to continue to just push forward with this because they believe that they are entitled to the land, that the Palestinian people should not be there. Imagine someone coming to your house, taking your home and saying, "This is my home. You can't live here now." How would you feel? But it happens. And so, yeah, they're going to continue being evil. They're going to continue being wicked. Benjamin Netanyahu is going to continue, killing people because there is no rest for the wicked. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gents. I did not listen. I saw this earlier before I went live. Sabby, did you hear the U.S. struck a ship leaving Venezuela? 11 soldiers were killed in the strike. I'll have to read about that. I'm not surprised, though. I'm not surprised. Yeah, we're going to have to get into that a little bit more on Thursday, because I told you this whole thing about, oh, we got to stop the drugs, the drugs, the drugs, the drugs. Oh, please. The US government, the CIA, they've allowed drugs not just to come into the country, but also to go into certain neighborhoods in this country. If they really wanted to stop the drugs, that was something they could have done a long time ago. That's not what this is about. This is about regime change. Hidden Name says, right, he's acting like he didn't approve the new weapons during this term. Exactly. Exactly. All right. We're going to move on to the next story, ladies and gents. If you haven't done so, smash the like. Hey, hey, hey. Again, the theme is no rest for the wicked. We are getting into this next story here about Donald Trump. And I got to say some things. Over Labor Day weekend, there were a number of people that were posting messages on social media that Donald Trump was not alive. And I think that's because Donald Trump wasn't making appearances. People didn't see him. They were like, is Donald Trump alive? Also, there's the health concerns that have been pointed out about Donald Trump, whether it was the swollen cankles, the purple mark on his hand. Regardless, you look at Donald Trump, and we're going to see this in just a minute. When you look at Donald Trump speaking today and you compare it to how he was in 2020, or hell, even 2 years ago, there's a decline that's happening there. It happens when people get older. But it appears that Donald Trump is not dead. People thought that. He's not dead. He is alive. He had a press conference earlier, which we will get into as well. But I think something kind of slipped under the radar. So Donald Trump is having decline, but it's not just about his health. There's also a decline with his performance. And I think because so many people have been focusing on whether or not Donald Trump is alive, this kind of slipped under the radar. You have got to see the new numbers for the economy under Donald Trump. Check this out.
CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Inton, joins me now on how Americans are feeling about tariffs. And it's interesting, you and I were talking about this. I never viewed tariffs as popular with Americans, but at least for Trump's base and supporters, at one point, they were really giving him the benefit of the doubt here.
Yeah, they really were, Bianna. And I will note, it was not just the base. It was the overall American public. And they have turned against tariffs the same way college football pundits have turned against Arch Manning after his performance in Columbus on Saturday. Look at this. New tariffs on imported goods. You go back to November of 2024. Look, the popular position was favor. They favored new tariffs on imported goods, 52%, 48% opposed. You go to this side of the ledger. Look at that. The opposition up like a rocket. We're talking about 60% opposing new tariffs compared to just 40% who favored. So it was majority favor back when Trump was reelected in November of 2024. Now it's a clear 3 in 5 Americans oppose it. The Americans have gotten a taste of the tariffs and they spit it right out.
So
What did I tell you guys when those tariffs were announced? I told you that we would be impacted. It was only a matter of time because we do import a lot of goods into this country. We just don't produce much here. That's just the reality. Gone are the days where the U.S. was this country that was a strong manufacturing company or country. My parents, probably your parents, my grandparents, probably your grandparents as well, depending on how old you are, participated in a manufacturing economy, probably did at some point. Like my grandparents moved from the Carolinas to Baltimore, Maryland to work in the factories. That's how, Sabby was born in Baltimore. But my grandparents were originally from North Carolina and South Carolina, but they were part of that Great Migration where they moved up further north to go where the jobs were. So that's not the country of today. And if you look at cities like Detroit, I think is probably the best example that you can point to. You see what happened when those jobs went away, when those manufacturing plants closed, people lost jobs. A white flight happened. People moved out of the city into the suburbs. The schools closed, et cetera. And you can look at that for a number of those cities that benefited from the Great Migration during that time. But that's the old America. The new America does a lot of importing. That's just the reality. So if you add tariffs to countries where we are importing the goods from, obviously that's going to impact us as well. But these numbers are very telling. November 2024, 52% favored it. Now 60% oppose it. because people are starting to see it's hitting their pocket. Another thing I saw earlier today, this article that came out about Gen Z, it says that Gen Z peeps in the United States, they are selling what they own. They're selling, furniture, clothes, etc. They are skipping meals, doing whatever they can just to try to make it in the economy. It would be different, I think, if it was 2020 and we were still under the pandemic. Obviously we took a big tank then. It's 2025 now, and we're not seeing that recoup. We're not seeing that, come back around. And I'll say this again. I honestly don't believe that the economy ever fully recovered from the '08 housing crisis. I don't think we ever got back to that point, if you were to ask me. Let's continue on a little bit more here.
Taste paying more? I mean, because that's how economists have always described this, as actually a tax on consumers.
Yes, it's exactly it. Why is the opposition up like a rocket? Well, it all comes down to money out of the pocketbook, right? Impact of tariffs on prices. Look at this in the short term. 77% of Americans now agree they raise prices in the short term. Look at this itty bitty number at the bottom. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. When you can count it on your own hand, it's a small percentage. Just 4% of Americans believe that in the short term, tariffs decrease prices. Long term, look, this has long been the Donald Trump argument, right? That even if they're short term pain, in the long term will pay off. Not according to Americans. Impact of tariffs on prices, even over the long term, look at that. 50% say increase, just 25%, just half the level say decrease. And while 25% in this particular case is better than 4%, 25% is way less than 50% of Americans who say that, in fact, prices will increase over the long term because of tariffs.
Can you do me a favor?
And this is the part, when they tell you about these tariffs, right? They tell you that you're going to feel a little bit of pain in the short term, but eventually, it's going to be worth it because it's all going to come back around. But now Americans that are being polled are starting to see, nope. That's not what my bank account says. That's not what my wallet says. I mean, it's a number of things, right? It's gas, it's housing, which continues to be an issue where rent is continuing to increase. I don't know if any of you live in the Massachusetts area, but I've noticed this as well. Even in places like Lowell, which used to be more affordable, they have these expensive apartment complexes that are renting for just as high as the ones in Boston. Is absolutely insane. And that's what I'm saying. You can leave the city and go to, another town or whatever, but eventually it's like those prices start to find their way towards that town as well. This is what a lot of people weren't paying attention to because everyone was focused on, is Donald Trump alive? Meanwhile, the economy.
Favor and go find who the 4% are.
I will go ahead. I will do
that
some
there's even
on the
4%
street
of
reporting.
Americans.
I'm sure I can go out to Times Square and see what I can find out there.
Okay, but in all seriousness, from the tariff policy to the trade policy, how is it impacting Trump's overall approval?
Right. Okay. If this was happening in a bubble, right, and it was, okay, I don't like tariffs, but it isn't impacting my overall view of Trump, I think Trump would be like, forget about it. Doesn't matter. But this is why the political implications are so important, because Fox News literally asked, what's the top reason that Trump's doing a bad job? What ranks as number one? The economy, and tariffs ranks as number one. The number one reason why those who disapprove of Trump think he's doing a bad job, it comes right back to tariffs. The bottom line is this: when prices go up, presidential approval ratings go down, and that's exactly what we are seeing in the polling.
Perhaps this was the deflection.
This is it. That's it right there. The economy and the tariffs. We saw the same thing under Biden's presidency. The economy was a big concern for a lot of people. It was the number one concern. Not even Gaza wasn't even the number one concern. So here we go again. Different president, same problem. Now, why does this continue to happen? Well, you have these political parties that continue to benefit from the corporatists. They support Wall Street. They support the lobbying, and they support their interests. When they pass legislation, that is really who they're trying to benefit here, not the working class, not the American people, not us. Long story short, they're out there for the billionaires. They're trying to make sure they get their just due, right? Like all these companies, Netflix, Amazon should be paying taxes. Billionaires should be paid. They should pay more taxes. And I don't think it's fair that because you're rich, you can have some offshore account so that all your money isn't accounted for. Get out of here. Meanwhile, if you have an everyday job, like let's say you're a teacher, or let's say you're a dental hygienist or a truck driver. Yeah. And let's see you not report all the money that you have and see how that works out for you come tax season. You're probably going to get an audit. You see, we can't get away with those things. Billionaires can. That's the part right there, folks, that a lot of people are just they were not paying attention to because everyone was focused on his health.
Ron Brownstein was talking about in a segment in the last hour about the increase in these ICE raids because they're deflecting from something the president is not happy about.
That's often something that Donald Trump will do is if he sees something he doesn't like, he's going to go in the other direction and try and bring the American mindset with him.
All right. Harry Enton, good to be with you.
Nice to be with you.
There you go. So I thought it was really important that I highlight that because we're going to get into the health part as well. But I do feel like people just didn't know about this. They didn't see it. Now let's move on to the health part. Something else really weird happened over the weekend concerning Donald Trump. So because people were saying that he's not alive, he's dead. People were even saying the person who gave the press conference today isn't Donald Trump and that that's a clone. People are coming up with all different types of things. Because people were saying that, there was something that was sent my way as well. There was this weird cryptic video that the White House posted for Donald Trump. It was really weird. Not something that you would post this time during a presidential term. Almost something you would post if someone was about to exit that role. Or if it's the end of their term, or they're about to resign or whatever. They posted this video. You guys got to see this. And people were like, what the hell is this?
Let me share some of the biggest lessons I've learned from a lifetime spent building dreams. First, if you think that you're too young to do something great, let me tell you that you are wrong. You're not too young. In America, with drive and ambition, young people can do anything. Second of all, and very importantly, you have to love what you do. I rarely see somebody that's successful that doesn't love what he or she does. Third thing is to think big. You know, you're going to do something, you might as well think big, because it's just as hard to solve a small problem as a big problem, and it's just as much energy and everything else, except the result is going to be a smaller one. So love what you do, but think big. Fourth is work hard. Work hard. Fifth is don't lose your momentum. You just want to keep it going, and you have to know if you are losing it, you have to know when you're losing it. So maybe you stop, and maybe it's time to stop.
You guys see what I'm saying? Like, this video was just really weird. Bicycle said, Rich his whole life giving advice. Exactly.
6, if you want to change the world, you have to have the courage to be an outsider. In other words, you have to take certain risks and do things a little bit differently. Otherwise, if that weren't the case, everybody would be successful. Number 7 is to trust your instincts, common sense. You can go very far in life with common sense. 8th, everybody should believe in the American dream. It's real, it's there, and it's right before you. 9th, think of yourself as a winner. The power of positive thinking. In recent years, too many of our young people have really been taught to think of themselves as victims. But in America, we reject that idea that anyone is born a victim. Our heroes are the ones who take charge of their own destiny despite the odds. And next is to be an original. The old-time greats were people who had the confidence to be a little different. God only created one of you, so don't try to be someone else. Finally, and most importantly, never, ever give up. I've learned that perseverance is everything, so whatever happens, no matter where you are in life, stay optimistic and just keep pushing forward. Never let anyone tell you that something is impossible, ever, ever, ever. In America, the impossible is what we all do best.
So, yeah. What the hell, man? So the White House posted that video over the weekend. Yeah, Trelana says this video looks like a memorial video. Exactly. So people saw this and they're like, is he resigning? Did something happen to Donald Trump? Why are you guys posting this video? So it was very weird. Very, very weird. And then, you know, there's more. Hold on one second. He had this press conference today. And there was something I noticed. So I saw the Fox News coverage. I saw the ABC News coverage of this press conference. Donald Trump was over 30 minutes late to the press conference. So at one point, and you'll see this with Fox News, they had their feed on for the longest time and like, okay, whoa, is this guy showing up or what? Where was Donald Trump all that time? Now, ABC News, when they covered the feed, check this out. Look at when it starts. Where is the beginning of this conversation? Watch this. This is the beginning of the video. This was the live feed. Watch this.
This will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs and probably much more than that, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. And that's billions, because it can't be millions. It's billions and billions of dollars.
Okay, where's the beginning of this press conference? Where's the beginning? So that's the ABC coverage, right? All right. Let's look at the coverage from Fox News. You come here to Fox News. I think did we come a little bit earlier? Just a little bit right about there. So you can see they were waiting all that time. They were waiting all that time, right? And when you look at theirs, same thing. Where's the beginning of the press conference? Watch this. Wait for it.
Rocket City. Okay, so Huntsville, Alabama. We love Alabama.
Where's the beginning of this conversation? Very weird. I don't know. Like maybe they gave up at some point, like during it. I don't know. But very weird. But because all that happened over the weekend, people said, well, Donald Trump's announcement that is going to happen on Tuesday is probably going to be him saying that he's going to resign. That's not what the announcement was. The announcement was Donald Trump talking about Space Force, that they have decided not to have it in Colorado, but to have it in Alabama. Now, I want you to think about what I just showed you about the economy, about those numbers that just came through. And this is where the focus is, on Space Force. They're not serious. They're not serious. He talks a little bit about it here.
I only won it by about 47 points. I don't think that influenced my decision, though, right? That didn't, right? But we had a lot of competition for this, and Alabama's getting it, Huntsville in particular. So congratulations, everybody. Katie, congratulations. This will result in more than 30,000 Alabama jobs and probably much more than that, and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. And that's billions, because it can't be millions. It's billions and billions of dollars. Most importantly, this decision will help America defend and dominate the high frontier, as they call it. I want to thank Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's doing a fantastic job. And Secretary of the Air Force, Troy Mink. Troy, thank you very much. Great job you're doing, Troy. This is such a big deal. This is one that everybody wanted to know. What are you doing? I also want to thank Senators Katie Britt, and I want to give my condolences. Your grandmother, her grandmother just passed away. She was 100, right?
100, and she loves you, Mr. President.
Well, and she was very proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Very, very proud of you. So thank you, Katie.
Wonderful woman.
She must have been. To produce you indirectly, I can tell you she had to be. Tommy Tuberville, who's a great coach. And I won't say anything about what happened with Alabama.
We're just fasting forward a
Far
little bit.
and away, number one in space. And reestablish Space Com with a mission to protect American space assets and detect any threat to our homeland. We initially selected Huntsville for the Spacecom headquarters, yet those plans were wrongfully obstructed by the Biden administration. And as you know, they moved them to a different locale. And today we're moving forward with what we want to do and the place that we want to have this. And this will be there for hopefully hundreds of years. That's where it's going to be.
So I just want to point out for those wondering why pick Alabama, NASA is there. Also, of course, he's going to pick it because it is a red state. Also, this is Donald Trump undoing something that Biden did. You know how this has been going on. But yeah, I wanted to point that out, that NASA is there, but that's beside the point. Like, this is not a priority. A priority right now is the economy, and that's where the focus should be, and it's not. So everybody thought, this conversation today, or this announcement was going to be about something to do with his presidency, something to do with his health, him resigning, or something in that scope. And that's not what happened. This is about Space Force. This country is not serious. Like, just not serious at all.
I will say I want to thank Colorado. The problem I have with Colorado, one of the big problems, they do mail-in voting. They went to all mail-in voting. So they have automatically crooked elections. And we can't have that. When a state is for mail-in voting, that means they want dishonest elections, because that's what that means. So that played a big factor also. In Huntsville, Space Com will play a key role in building the Golden Dome, as you know. That's going to be a big thing. Everybody wants to be a participant in it. Missile Defense Shield, we're going to be having a Golden Dome that the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. The finest, the best. And by the way, Canada called. They want to be a part of it, and that'll be great. But Canada.
A Golden Dome for defense for the United States. So you see where all the money's going? That's why we don't have health care for everybody. All this money, this is all defense. The Space Force, that's defense. The Golden Dome, that's defense. This is where they put all the money. That's why we don't have what we need to have. So you see, we got bridges falling apart. Some of you, you know, you've driven across some raggedy bridges, some bad roads, buildings falling apart. But this is where the money is going. This is where the priority is, ladies and gentlemen. We're going a little bit more here, and I want to show you something else that was said during this press conference that I think is important.
It wants very much to be included in that, and we're going to work something out with them, I hope. It will also ensure that our technological capabilities, of which we're way ahead of anybody else, there's nobody close, remain unmatched long into the future. So I'd like to ask Secretary Hegseth to say a few words. He was very much a part of it. And really, everybody behind me was. Every one of these people would call me and lobby me. I said, Katie, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I know what you want. She said, that's right, sir. That's what I want. And they got their way. So I just want to congratulate. These are really special people. They're politicians in many ways, but they're great patriots, I think even more so than politicians. So they fought very hard to get it, and it's an honor.
So here's Donald Trump giving kudos to the lobbyists. So you see, as I said before, he knows that running on a populist message is a winner. Democrats haven't figured this out yet. But he knows that that's a winner. So he runs on it, but he doesn't intend to actually do it. Now, he did comment on these questions about whether he was dead or alive at the same conference. Listen to this. You pull this out. Sometimes Twitter does that. Sorry, guys. Sometimes the Twitter videos do that. There we go.
Viral social media trend over the weekend. How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? You see that?
No.
People didn't see it for a couple days. 1.3 million user engagements as of Saturday morning about your demise.
Really? I didn't see that. You know, I have heard, it's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said, there must be something wrong with him. Biden wouldn't do him for months. You wouldn't see him. And nobody ever said there was ever anything wrong with him, and we know he wasn't in the greatest of shape. No, I heard that. I get reports. Now, you knew I did an interview that lasted for about an hour and a half with somebody, and everybody saw that was on one of your competitors. I did numerous shows, and also did a number of truths, long truths, I think pretty poignant truths. No, I was very active over the weekend. They also knew I went out to visit some people at the club that I own, pretty nearby on the Potomac River. And no, I've been very active actually over the weekend. I didn't hear that one. That's pretty serious.
I'm glad it's
well, it's fake news. You know, it's just it's so fake. That's why the media has so little credibility. I knew they were saying, like, is he okay? How's he feeling? What's wrong? I said, I just left. And it's also sort of a longer weekend, you know, it's Labor Day weekend. So I would say a lot of people know I was very active this Labor Day. I had heard that, but I didn't hear it to that extent. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, so cyberspace said I'm less dead than Biden. That's a good one, cyberspace. Yeah, so you guys can even tell here, Donald Trump doesn't look like his usual self. You can tell there's something, I don't know, he sounds like he has a cold or something, I don't know. He also went on to say this, that the world needs the U.S. Listen to this.
Because without the United States, everything in the world would die. It's true. It's so powerful. It's so big. And I made it really big in the first 4 years. Then it started to degenerate with what this Biden administration did, but we built it up to a level that I never thought we could be at this quickly. We're the hottest, we're the best financially. The money coming in is so big because of tariffs and other things, but because of tariffs. Tariff gets us even those other things. Plus, it gets us great negotiators. I settled 7 wars, and numerous of those wars were because of trade, and because without the United States.
First of all, the tariffs, I just showed you guys the numbers, the polling numbers on the tariffs. What is he talking about? The voters don't like the tariffs. The numbers just show you that. And then 2, this part here about, well, the world wouldn't be great without the United States. I disagree, because without the United States, a lot of these countries would be thriving by now. Without the United States, Afghanistan probably wouldn't have had the famine that they had. Without the United States, Haiti probably has a robust economy. It's not just the U.S. with Haiti. There's also France too. But don't forget, Woodrow Wilson sent in the Marines. They seized the banks, the businesses, all those things. Without the United States, a lot of these countries that have been impoverished would probably not be that way, because you wouldn't have the U.S. stealing their resources. And then after us, you'd have to look at Britain, because Britain stole a lot of shit from a lot of countries. So I disagree with that. BRICS is rising. It seems like they're moving forward without us, based on the videos that I saw as of recently. But that's basically what's going on with Donald Trump there. Like I said, there's no rest for the wicked. And it's obvious watching that press conference, Donald Trump does not look like he is in good health. He doesn't look like he's in. Compare the videos. We did this during the debates. Compare the videos, that video from like even just a year ago. And when we pointed this out, he says no one mentioned it about Biden. Corporate media, no, they didn't. Independent media did. We were talking about it. We said, yo, this dude is not all there. Something is wrong. And I'm telling you the same thing about Donald Trump. It ain't all there, Jack. It is not all there. And I think we'll have to see with time. But make sure you answer that poll, because I'm curious if you guys think that he's going to make it through his term here. And if not, then you rolling in the JD Vance, the Peter Thiel creation. Either way, big business, corporations, and the military industrial complex win. That's what's going on, folks. That is what's going on. But Donald Trump is already showing decline, and he hasn't finished his first year. Pay attention. Pay attention. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gents. All right. Shout out to CEB Applejack. Sabby, we need help in Ohio. My brother, Cowboy Kitty, and Natalie. I am boots in the ground. We are trying to read as much awareness. You should probably send me an email, CEB. Soto said he's still alive. I know. KZ says, yeah, that's why games are more expensive. Yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. That's right. That's right. We don't really make much here. Dana said, we depend on China for everything. Medication to electronic to junk. We do. And thank you for this one, CEB. I used to live in Lawrence and Lowell. Prices used to be $600 a month. My mom lives there. She asked me for help all the time. She pays $1,500 for a flat. Yeah. And in Lowell, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Thank you, Mark. 100% tax on everything over $1 million. Cat Lady, tennis court. They posted old pictures. I heard that. I heard people were saying that those photos of Donald Trump were old. Thank you, Super Seamster. Thanks, Sabs. Love you. Keep spitting truth. Bakersfield, California. And thank you, Mark. Trump reminds me of Caligula in an ancient Rome film. CJ says, Sabby, I'm looking at Trump's eyes. I really believe he's suffering from mild dementia. When people have dementia, the eyes are a key indicator of impairment. That is interesting. And thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Sab, for all you do. I learned so much. You are welcome, Andrea. Thank you. Hey. All right, let's get away from the Trumpish. Let's get away from, some war talk for a second. We're going to dive into capitalism. Patrick Bet-David had a debate on Jubilee. You guys know about these Jubilee debates where he debated anti-capitalist. So it's one capitalist versus anti-capitalist. And there's a couple of things that he said here that I do want to debunk, and I have some data to show you. The first person that he speaks to, they're talking about incentive is the engine of capitalism. And if you remove it, you're going to have issues. Well, I think those of us, and we'll get into it, but some of us are living proof that that is not the case. And I'll get into all of that. So let's get into the first person that he debates here. Check this out.
How are you? What's your name?
Zena.
Zena.
Awesome. So this claim about incentive is one that we see often promoted by capitalism enjoyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this idea that, profit incentives is the only thing that can make humans do things, get up out of bed every day, which has never been the case. Historically, it's not the case. Psychologically.
Historically, it's never been the case?
No.
What has been the case?
So we've seen.
What's been the incentive?
The incentive is intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation?
Of course. Have you ever heard of intrinsic motivation?
Of course I have. So you think people are going to go just do anything for no incentives?
The incentive is intrinsic, meaning passion, interest, and honing your skills.
Whether you get paid or not.
Well, the problem is that we're forcing people to, need to, work to survive.
So what's the alternative? So give me another solution, another economic.
Pause. So we're going to go ahead and pause there. Notice that Patrick said whether they get paid or not. And I just want to give a couple of examples. Let's go with the people who are not paid. If we only did things because of financial gain, then we wouldn't have volunteers. We wouldn't have mutual aid. These are easy examples to point to. I do mutual aid. My comrades at RBN do mutual aid. We got that concept from the Black Panthers. That's where it comes from. The free breakfast program at schools, that came from the Black Panthers. Now, for those of us who are doing mutual aid, we're not paid to do that. There's no financial incentive. So people wonder, well, then why do you do it? We do it because we're passionate about helping people. You can say the same thing about people who are volunteers. What about people who volunteer for things like Habitat Humanity, people who volunteer to build homes for people who have volunteered to help children? There's a place here called Cradles to Crayons and things like that, where they gather supplies and donate to kids that are in need. Again, you're not paid as a volunteer. It's something that you do because you're passionate about it. That's what she's talking about when she says it's passion that drives people. Now let's get to the money, because I do want to give another example here. I want you to think about professions that people are a part of that pay very little. Let's start with teachers. Teachers, look, if you want to be rich, don't go into teaching. Hey, I come from the education field, and I'm here to tell you, if you're trying to make money, honey, don't go into teaching, because it ain't there. And you're going to do more than just teach. A lot of people don't realize this. Teachers aren't just standing up in front of a classroom teaching their students. Teachers are teachers. Sometimes they're babysitters. Oh, I've seen it all. Sometimes they're even counselors. Believe it or not, there are times when things happen with their students. A lot of times, some of the students, instead of going to talk to their parents, they'll go to their teacher. I've seen it. Talk about babysitting. Sometimes when kids' parents don't show up to pick them up after school, who's there watching the student? The teacher. And sometimes, teachers have to be moderators. I've watched teachers break up fights. So that's a profession that doesn't pay much. People become teachers because they are passionate about teaching. That's what she's talking about. There's other things that we can point out, other jobs that people do that, even like people who are like bartenders. Some people really love bartending. Some people really love waiting tables. Like they love doing that. So I think for Patrick Bet-David, it seems like with him, like that's what he does. He has to be motivated financially to do something. And we know this because he just interviewed a war criminal and kissed his ass the entire time he was on the show on PBD podcast. That was Benjamin Netanyahu. We know that Patrick Bet-David has shown us that he's willing to do what he wants to do or what he can do for money. Don't forget he had a pyramid scheme. Before this whole PBD podcast really took off, Patrick Bet-David had a pyramid scheme. So he was exploiting people. The pyramid schemes, like Avon, what's another one? Amway, this whole idea that you have this pyramid and you're supposed to recruit other people to sell underneath you, and then they recruit people to sell underneath them. And what's supposed to happen is all of this is supposed to trickle down to you, but it doesn't. I know a number of people that have participated in, whether it's been Avon, Amway. Listen, I know or people they bought into it too. All I got to do is get other people under me, and then I'll be making more money and and all this kind of stuff. But the people at the top, the ones who making all the money, and that was Patrick Bet-David. So that's him. Now, are there some people who are only driven by financial incentive? Yes, and he's one of them. But there are also people who are not driven by that way. And I think we need to look around the US, and next time you go into, I don't know, a store or a restaurant, or next time you see a teacher, look at some of the people who are really passionate about what they do and they do not receive a high salary. Let's continue on.
Finish the talking point?
Yeah, actually, I'm
awesome.
curious.
So yeah, the psychological theory of self-determination is widely accepted in psychology. It basically explains that intrinsic motivation and passion is actually what predicts incentive. You're arguing that incentive is integral to profit-driven motivation. That's not true. Extrinsic motivation, all times, at every single case, is going to predict less creativity, less motivation, less skill, etc. Intrinsic motivation is what causes things like technological development. Some of the greatest breakthroughs have been from people who are devoted in honing their skill.
So should they get paid for it?
I think that we shouldn't live in a system that privately owns the means of production and forces people in this position.
What college did you go to?
USC.
You went to USC. What did you major in?
Sociology.
Sociology. Who's your hero as a professor? Who's the professor you look up to?
This doesn't seem like a topic that's related to capitalism.
This question? The reason why I asked this question is because somebody convinced you of that.
Somebody
convinced you that is
so psychology and studies convinced me of this fact about the human mind.
If someone convinced her of that, isn't it fair to say that someone could have convinced Patrick Bet-David of his position? I also thought it was kind of weird that he referred to her professor as a hero. Why? Like, who's your hero? Hey, I think all of us had like a favorite teacher or a professor here or there. I did too, but I didn't see them as a hero. Very strange.
Fortunately, to your claim, results show that the greatest
Results show
economical
that
system
intrinsic
is
motivation predicts more
capitalism
creativity
that allows
and more
people to go
profit
above and
than
beyond
anything
and
like
solve
extrinsic
every
motivation.
single issue out there. An entrepreneur who gets up, who says,
What was your
I'm
claim
gonna
again,
be-
mister?
I'm going to incentive. The
Incentive.
entrepreneur
What about
who has
incentive?
an incentive to go out there and build their lives, and you put
So
no
I'm saying that this
monetary
incentive that you're talking about,
Yeah.
What predicts the best incentive, the best drive, and the best
So
creativity
what do you think about
has
Elon
been proven
Musk?
by
What do you think
psychology.
about Elon Musk?
Can we respond to my claim?
This is about incentive.
All right,
though.
awesome. So you're arguing that incentive is intrinsic and tied to extrinsic motivation. What we find is that the best incentive comes from intrinsic motivation.
So a person that's passionate about solving an issue is going to build something bigger than somebody else that's not.
Yeah, so someone who has a true passion for this.
Yeah, so
Exactly. So profit motivation is not the thing that's driving innovation, right?
Of course it is.
Psychology.
Of course
So
it is.
psychology proves that that's not the case.
There's not,
that
if
profit's
there's-
not the reason
if
that we
there's
have
not-
the greatest inventions that we do today.
I don't know if I disagree with the fact that there's a passion behind it. Are you saying people with passion, even if there wasn't the incentive to make as much money as they would make, people would still
That's
pursue
exactly
it
what-
even with or without money?
That's what psychology
Well,
says.
your claims are wrong because
not true.
Whoever your psychology professor is,
It's
if
not-
you look at data and you find out how America, that's only been around for 249 years, schooled all the other countries that have been around for hundreds,
Yeah,
if not
I'll tell you
thousands
how.
of years.
Because they stole resources from those countries. So what are we really going there, Patrick? So here's the thing, folks. How many of you, if you were given the opportunity to have a job, to hold a job that you're passionate about, and you didn't have to worry about the income, you didn't have to worry about your salary, how many of you would do it? You see, this is the problem, Patrick, because here's the thing. Most people would rather do something they are passionate about if they had the opportunity to do so. You can look at people who, artists is another example of this, because artists a lot of times don't make much. That's why they call them struggling artists. Like, The point is, a lot of times people end up doing jobs that they may not necessarily be passionate about because they're trying to pay their bills, whether it's keeping a roof over your head, whether it's rent, maybe feeding your kids, etc., student loan debt, whatever it is. I know a number of people that majored in one thing in undergrad, but didn't end up going into that field because they couldn't, because they had all these student loans they had to pay off. But I think a lot of us, we had the opportunity to do so, we would rather pursue something that we're passionate about. Now that brings up the capitalism issue, because the reality is the reason why people end up in those situations where they have to take jobs that they don't like just because they have to pay the bills is because of capitalism, which is increasingly getting worse in this country. We have a homelessness crisis in this country that has only increased over the years. It's not decreasing. Tent cities used to just be a California thing. Now they're everywhere. So I don't see how this capitalism is really helping a lot of people. You'll see that when we get to the second person, he talks about people getting out of poverty. But that's a big part of it. A lot of people would rather do something that they're passionate about. Let's continue on here.
They schooled all.
They did better than others because the incentive
because they accumulated profit, right, to 1% of the population and continue to produce on that
not
basis.
Necessarily. It's
right,
not,
we have this. Okay,
it's
so
not necessarily.
Do we want to respond because you can say that
you've been interrupting the entire time? So if you're saying about the 1% are the problem and they're the only ones that make money.
That's
a lot
not
of
what
people
I said.
make money. You said the profit goes to the 1%.
I'm explaining how it is that America has become the dominant power that it is now, right? What we see is that because we have this engine, right, this desire to accumulate profit, we morally justify things like going into other countries, imperializing them, colonizing them, extracting their resources, right, to funnel our country, right? Social democracies in the Nordic countries don't do this. So yeah, they might not be the wealthiest power, but they have higher rates of education, literacy, human satisfaction, etc. Right. So it depends on what we actually value in a society.
And they're happier people. That's why countries like Finland and Iceland, this is why they keep getting ranked as the happiest country, because their needs are met. When your needs are met, you're more likely to be happier. It's just a reality, So this is really important. So he doesn't believe that a lot of it's going to the top 1%. It is going to the top 1%. Look at any company, look at how much the staff is being paid, and then look at what the CEO makes. Look at these things. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Boston University, the president of BU at that time, this was pre-pandemic, at that time was making $2 million a year. Why? It's not even a top 10 school, but he was paid $2 million a year. What do you think the staff was making? I'll go ahead and tell you, I wasn't making much. A lot of people don't realize that unless you're like a dean, a lot of us we weren't making much. And I was the academic advisor, but the president making $2 million. You got people in these positions at these universities. This is an example because this is where I came from. In these universities that have master's degrees, had to get a master's degree just to get the position that they have at the school. And they're making maybe $50,000 a year in Boston, which is nothing here. But the president of the university is making $2 million. And he lives in a house that the university pays for. So he don't have no rent. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
Behavior
do we value well-being or do we value profit accumulation?
Validates your point. If that's the case, people would move to those states. They don't. When you judge a great restaurant by the amount of people that come in, you can say the food sucks here.
Yeah,
you can say the service sucks here.
There were millions of people that lived in Germany.
But everybody's lined up to want to come here. They're not lined up to go into those countries. They're just used by professors as theories.
There were millions of people that also lived in Germany in the 1920s.
I lived in Germany before as well for 2 years.
It's also not easy to get citizenship in those countries too. Especially like Switzerland is probably the hardest one I've heard of. It's not that easy to just say, I'm going to move to Finland. It's not as easy as you think. So, there's that. Plus, a lot of times people come here because they want to try to achieve the American dream, which I would say is not really a thing anymore. But these are the stories that they are told about the United States. Let's get to the second part here. I do want to get to this part about poverty. And this is something that I know quite a bit about.
My next claim is capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system.
Patrick.
How are you?
I'm Gabby.
Gabby?
Yeah,
Good
nice
to meet you.
So I would argue that governments have actually lifted the most people out of poverty. If you look historically, we look at China, for instance, had the most significant poverty reduction in all of human history. They pulled 800 million people out of poverty using state-owned enterprises and state centralized planning. They did work with the capitalist system, but they did it, most of it was done through state-funded infrastructure, education, and contributing to strong literacy programs, redistributing the wealth. I think that my other argument would be that there hasn't been an opportunity for alternative systems like socialism to pull enough people out of poverty. So we look at examples.
There hasn't been?
There hasn't been enough opportunities for them to succeed. And so when
Why
we
do you
say,
think that is?
I think that is partly because of the US, and I think because capitalist forces and global market insecurities have sabotaged these attempts to do socialism. So we look at an example in Chile in the 1960s, they elected a democratic socialist, and he proposed literacy reform, wealth redistribution, land reform, and all of that was a threat, obviously, to the United States because McCarthyism was on the rise at the time. And so instead of allowing Allende to have a chance with that, the U.S. Orchestrated a CIA-backed coup to take over and to have a military dictatorship that led the country instead of Allende, who actually was having a lot of success in reducing the poverty rates before the U.S. interfered. And so I think we look at other parts of Latin America, like Venezuela, for instance, and we see the same thing. We see that the U.S. has interfered several times. You know, with Chavez in Venezuela, he was able to reduce the poverty reduction in half in the first decade of him being in office. And he was sabotaged ultimately by the US and by a military dictatorship. So the
Pause. I see someone did their homework. Someone did their homework, right? So check the fact check over here. It says poverty decreased under Chavez from 62% in 2003 to 32% in 2011. But today, under the system he created in the leadership of handpicked successor, Venezuela's poverty rate is more than 90%. Due to inflation that once hit 300,000%, most citizens can't afford a proper meal. You know what that fact check omits there? The sanctions on Venezuela from the United States. That's not listed there as well. That is going to have an impact, right? Okay, let me let her continue here.
The people that replaced them were actually.
So may I respond?
capitalists.
It's
Sure.
a lot of different cases here. So
Sure.
thank you for that.
Of
So
course.
let's go China first. Okay, so when you say China was able to recover and because they use state-funded, nationalized systems. So in 1978, Xiaoping, the leader of China, went to Japan. He saw what was going on with Japan for 2 decades. Every year, their GDP was grown by 15%. The economy was doubling pretty much every 4 years. Sure. They go over there, they say, we got to find a way to compete with Japan. How do they have fewer people, but they're beating us? They sit down with their leaders after a few drinks. Eventually, they say, how did you fix your economy to be growing the way that it is? A capitalistic society that they had in Japan. They asked the question from Xiaoping, the Prime Minister Fukuda, asked the question, how many banks do you guys have in China? He says, we have one bank. He said, it's a nationalized bank? He says, yeah. That's it? Yeah. How many loan officers do you have? Not many. You want to compete with one bank? Yes. He says, if you want to compete with us or others, here's what you have to do. You need 5,000 banks with 35 branches, with 30 loan officers. That's a total of 5.25 million loan officers and a population of 600 million people that are living there. You do that every week. You take 10 applications with these loan officers for small business owners, and you allow the small business owner to compete. They did that. China started competing. By the way, in America in the 1920s, we had around 30,000 banks when we were really, competing in a marketplace. In the 80s, we ended up having around 14,000. Today, we only have.
I think he's missing the point, right? Notice where his focus is. His focus is on the money, on the banks. So here's something I want to mention. The point that she's trying to make is that they don't have the homelessness crisis that we do because they pretty much guarantee housing for their people. We don't. This is why you don't see a lot of homeless people in China. It's just like, and honestly, if you go to other countries, you'll realize this as well. This is why you don't see as many homeless people. So there's that. Now, China isn't perfect, But the point is, if capitalism is working out so great for the United States of America, why is our homelessness rate increasing and not decreasing? Why? I'll tell you why. One of the reasons why it's increasing. Speaking of these banks that he likes to talk about, one of the things that we've allowed to happen in this country, we have allowed private equity to buy single family homes. We've allowed them to enter the housing market. And that's a big part of the price increase. That's part of it, is the private equity. Don't forget about BlackRock. Don't forget about the '08 housing crisis. So again, how has that really helped and improved? If that's the case, we should be on the up and up. We shouldn't be tanking. You shouldn't have people in their 30s with 4 roommates. It should be the exact opposite. It should be, you look back at talk to people who grew up during the 60s or the 70s, etc., where people were able to work a factory job and own a single family home. What happened to that? What happened to, during that time, families were able to have one parent work and another parent was able to stay in the household and watch the children, so they didn't have to pay for daycare? What happened to that? If capitalism's working out so great in the US, what happened to that? Why is it that all of my friends and myself and everyone that I know, why is it that all of us have to have a 2-income household? Someone explain this to me. Why? Why do you have people in their 40s living in shoeboxes if capitalism is working out so great? Look at home ownership in this country. Look at what is happening. Why is it that Gen Z people can't buy homes? If it's working out so great, it's not. And I'll let him finish, and I'm going to show you the data on the poverty, which he doesn't bring up.
4,100 banks in America. That concept of allowing just one bank to compete, it's not going to work. China takes on the idea from Japan.
If I
they
can
start
interrupt
growing.
you, I mean, I think that
they start growing with certain
I think
capitalistic
you're
philosophies.
thinking about this in very capitalist terms, which makes sense. You're a capitalist, but
because it works. That's the idea. Because it's produced the
you're only thinking about
results.
these scenarios in a situation where market mechanisms are in place, and this is the problem that I have with so many capitalists: is they can't exit their worldview and try to see a world where socialism could be in place because they don't understand the untapped potential of socialism. And I'm a democratic socialist. I think that we need to build forward towards that with reforms, and I think we need to work with the government. I don't think that we should abandon the state. I also don't think that we should give state elites the complete control over society. I do think that we should work with the state to instill these reforms and then eventually erode capitalism.
But unfortunately, socialism has had hundreds of
But you're
years
thinking in terms of
to
competition.
produce results, and it hasn't worked. Do you know why it doesn't work, though?
It's been sabotaged.
It's been sabotaged, or it's because it forces people to do something they don't want to do?
Pause. I think now we're talking about 2 different things. There's democratic socialism and there's socialism. So for a lot of the democratic socialists, when they're talking about democratic socialism, they're referring to like what countries like in Europe have. Like they're talking about like a Norway, a Denmark, like, you know, that style of democratic socialism, right? And he's saying that it doesn't work, but apparently it does. If you look it up, guys, if you look at the happiest countries in the world, we're not one of them. Surprise. It's countries where people have their needs met. It's Iceland. It's Finland. I never went to Finland. I lived in Europe for quite a while, actually, but I never went to Finland. But it's there. There's a reason why. When you have your needs met, obviously, it's going to be easier for you to be happy. That's just a reality. Now, we can go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I talked about this in an article recently, actually earlier this year, where I talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So one of those things is your health. We don't even have healthcare for everybody in this country. It's kind of a need, according to Maslow. I mean, decided this a long time ago. Food, clothing, shelter. We have a poverty rate among children in this country. Remember when they said we cut child poverty in half? I was like, we shouldn't have child poverty at all. If capitalism is working out so great, we shouldn't have it. Why do we? We shouldn't have children going hungry in this country, but we do. Do you know, when I worked in education, you know, some kids, the only time they eat is when they get that free meal at school. These are the things people don't want to talk about. I said shelter, but we got all these homeless people on the street. We got people constantly being evicted. We have gentrification where people are priced out of their neighborhoods again because you allowed the banks and the investors and private equity, you allowed this capitalism to take hold. And that's how we get there.
Does capitalism not do the same?
No, capitalism gives
there's
you
7 million people in this country who have to work multiple jobs just to get by.
I have to work multiple jobs
They're
for a season.
forced to do that because either they do that or they starve. So if the options are to work or to starve, that's not freedom, that's economic coercion.
Respectfully, if you do that for a period of your life, I understand it. If you're doing that for 30 years, you're doing something wrong. You shouldn't be working multiple jobs for the rest of your life.
So first of all, I'm not going to argue with this moral argument. I think that people who live in poverty, especially when we look at how many people live in poverty in this country, and also it depends on how you define the poverty line, but there's 40 million Americans who live below the poverty line in this country. There's 3 guys in this country that own 40% of the wealth. How does that work in a country that is
You really want to go there? You want to go there? Okay, so let's talk about it. So when we talk about the rich people at the top, okay, and you say, well, the rich don't pay enough taxes. Do you know what the bottom 50% of taxpayers in America pay towards the revenue that the government gets in taxes? Do you know what the bottom 50% pays?
Tell me.
2% of taxes. Do you know what the
They should because they make less. What is your argument here, Patrick?
1% pays?
There's been several years.
Do you know what the top 1%? Do you know?
Been nothing
No,
in
no,
their
hang on a
federal
second.
taxes.
This is from the IRS. I'm not writing a blog from Huffington Post. This is not Daily Beast. I'm telling you the story. The top 1% pays 42%
I'll say this: the top 1% is about to pay a lot less, and
They should pay more than that. Remember, this is just the money. Let me tell you something that Patrick's not telling you. That's just the money that's reported. That doesn't include a lot of these rich people, especially the billionaires. Like I told you, they have offshore accounts. They know how to hide money when they want to so that they can fit at a certain part in that tax bracket. That's just the money that's reported. So he's saying this as if they shouldn't pay that. If you make more, you should pay more. Well, what is the issue here?
taxes because of the provision
They'll
that just went
actually
into
end up paying
Trump's,
even
your
more
guys'
revenue to the
big
government.
beautiful bill.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right. So let's look at some data because he's saying these things, but I want to show you what the data shows. Check this out. National Poverty in America Awareness, right? So this came out this year in January. Check this out. Everybody pay attention to this. In 2023, the official poverty rate fell 0.4 percentage points to 11.1%. There were 36.8 million people in poverty in 2023, not statistically different from 2022. Why in the hell, if capitalism is working out so great in the United States, why do we have 36.8 million people living in poverty in this country? So those other countries that they're mentioning, China does not have that. Why do we have so many people living in poverty if it's working out so well? Now I want you to see who those people are. Between 2022 and 2023, the official poverty rate decreased for white and non-Hispanic white individuals. Women, 18 to 64-year-olds, unrelated individuals, all workers, less than full-time, year-round workers, and those with some college. Check this out. See, this is what I wanted you to see. The only group to experience a statistically significant increase in their official poverty rate was the 2 or more races population. You see that? So now that shows you who is in poverty. Let's go on a little bit more. I want to show you another statistic here. See, again, if capitalism is working out so great, why is our poverty rate so high? Why? The numbers are here right for you. Look at this. This is ridiculous. So we scroll down here. I think there's one more part here I wanted to mention. Or we're going to the next one. Oh, this one. Check this out. I want to show you this. Transitions into and out of poverty in the United States. I want us to look at key findings. This part here is very important. Increased time spent in poverty is associated with lower chances the individual will exit poverty, which ranges from 56% after 1 year poor to 13% for those in poverty for 7 or more years. In other words, the longer you are poor, the harder it is for you to exit poverty. Now, I know it's cliche to say that poverty is a cycle, but it's true. You know, a lot of times they like to tell you about the people who grew up poor and they made their way out. Those people are outliers. Oprah Winfrey is an outlier. LeBron James is an outlier. So we always got to remember that. It is hard to get out of poverty if you are born into it. The longer you're in it, the harder it's going to be. It also says here, a 3% increase in the regional unemployment rate, which is roughly the magnitude experienced at the beginning of a recession, reduces the exit rate from poverty by approximately 6% per year and raises the annual rate of re-entry into poverty by 9%. So when we have recessions, it makes it even more difficult for you to get out of poverty. Also, apparently, can make it so that some people return to poverty. This is what I mean when I say a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. All it takes sometimes is one incident to really screw you over, whether your car breaks down or a medical issue that you got to pay out of pocket for because we live in a country that doesn't give everybody health care. It's things like this. The other part here, the decline of approximately $100 in the 20th percentile of individual real weekly wages between the early 1970s and the mid 1990s is estimated to have reduced the annual exit rate from poverty by 15%. Wages did not adjust for inflation over the years. So he doesn't tell you that. And for the person who mentioned the social programs, there's something else that he does not tell you. Check this out. So they mentioned the other countries. Let's talk about the myths here. Americans who are poor are worse off than elsewhere. The myth is that the poor in the US are not so bad off, can be found in a wide range of places. It basically reflects the idea that those in poverty have nothing to complain about, that given the conditions in less developed countries, things could be worse. It is certainly true that if we compare the US to countries in sub-Saharan Africa, make this bigger, sorry. Physical poverty in the US is obviously less extreme. The US did not have the widespread famine and severe stunting of children that is sometimes found in extremely poor countries. However, most analysts would argue that the more relevant comparison would be the group of other high economy countries, such as those found in the EU, Canada, Japan, Australia, and so on. So how does the US compare to other countries? So we're going to debunk what Patrick Beck-David is saying. Look at this chart. We are looking at the extent of poverty across 26 OECD countries. So the United States is at the bottom here, and for a reason. If you look at the poverty rate overall, Iceland has 5.4. Remember, that's one of the most happy countries. Denmark 5.5, Finland 6.3. These are more the happier countries. But if you look at the United States, our poverty rate overall, we are at 17.8. You see the difference between us and those other countries where people have their basic needs met. Now let's look at children. This is a very telling part here. The children in Iceland, 5.8%, Denmark, 2.9%, Finland, 3.6%. Again, the happy people. And if you scroll down to the United States, when you're talking about children, 20.9. So if capitalism is working out so well in the United States, Why do we have a higher rate of poverty than when you compare us to these other countries? Whether it's the children, whether it's overall, why? And social programs. Eric, if we can go on this sheet, if we can do control. Oh, okay, there we go. I want to show you something else. I think it was this one. Aha. Something else he doesn't show you. Check this out. Supplemental poverty measure. Check this out. Social Security continues to be the largest anti-poverty program, moving 27.6 million individuals out of supplemental poverty measure in 2023. Patrick Bet-David doesn't tell you this. That's a big deal. 27.6 million individuals based on Social Security alone. That's the part that people don't want to face. Now, Patrick will come up with this story. Oh, I came to the US and I worked hard and I did a good, and that's how I got to where I am. Well, there's a lot of people that work hard in this country and they still don't get out of poverty because people like you exploited them, Patrick. People like you got to where you are because you exploited the people who worked for you with your pyramid scheme. So this is something that the US, if they wanted to fix it, they could fix it. And that's why, notice, you don't really hear a lot of times candidates talk about this. They always say we got to enrich the middle class. We have to build a strong middle class. You don't hear them say anything about poor people. They don't mention them. They don't mention working poor and they don't mention poor. Why? Because those are not the people that they're trying to help. They've kind of just written them off as a lost cause. Let's just kind of give them a little bit to keep them where they are. And then we'll just, go from there. But we're not really going to give them enough so that they can get out of that situation. The money makers at the top, the 0.01%, the gatekeepers at the top want to remain at the top. And they don't really want to let anybody else up in that club. That's just the reality, because that's less money for them. And you would think that people who are billionaires that have billions and billions of dollars, that they would eventually say, well, I don't need all this money. No, 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 no. They're greedy. And it's never enough. So again, I asked that question, Patrick Bet-David, if capitalism is working out so well in the United States, why is our poverty rate as high as it is? Why is our child poverty rate as high as it is? Why is our homelessness rate increasing if it's working out so well? Let's go to some of the comments here from the chat, ladies and gents. Thank you. Eric, we can go to part 2 for Type VNC. Thank you. Yes, I'm about to mention it. Thank you, Nia. Hey, Sabby, will there be another mutual aid workshop that you host before the end of the year? Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to show that in just a second. This Saturday. Michelle said, I volunteer at soup kitchens at the women's shelter, no pay. The problem with our current culture is it's all about advertisements and big money, people promoting just for money. Holistic says a huge amount of the work that maintains people in and society is completely unpaid, mostly done by women. That's why wages for housework is an issue. Interesting. Suzanne, as a teacher, I was paid by the hour for 6 hours per day. And I often work 12 to 14 hours, including making lesson plans, correcting and creating homework. That means I was paid about half for my hours. Yeah, there's a common myth about teachers. Like, people will say, well, teachers get the summers off. It's not what you think. Shout out to Clickety Click for becoming a new member. Hey, whoop, whoop. Thank you, CEB. Sorry, Sabby, I was speaking quickly. ICE illegally deputized the sheriff's office in Ohio, and a friend to Hardlands Media, Cowboy Kitty's wife, Natalie, was detained indefinitely. I think this continues on here. Thank you. Only the commissioner's office can make deals with ICE, not the sheriff. We need to spread awareness. They want to send her to Ukraine. What? And thank you for this one. I'm a journalist. JB had me on RBN and Misty had me on do dissidents. I just need help spreading the word to get people out on the streets. Yeah, so email me. That's usually what people would do. My email address is in the description box. Thank you, James. I wonder what incentive to get up the Native Americans had the ones who walk the Trail of Tears. And shout out to my comrade JB. Also, the homeless rate among boomers is skyrocketing. Capitalism doesn't work for workers. Exactly. That's another thing they don't want to tell you. All you got to do is look around in these streets. Look around in the streets. Let's get the rumble rant. Thank you. Hey, hey, hey. Thank you, Mark. Sabs, CEO in the U.S. ratio to worker is 475 to 1, 20 times the next nearest country. There you go. And thank you for this one, Mark. Sab, if I said bull, fish, a-hole, would they throw me off? Throw me off? Throw you where? I don't know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing on. Again, the theme is No Rest for the Wicked. Quick announcement. Many of you have been asking about this. This Saturday is my free mutual aid workshop. If you want to attend, it's a virtual workshop via Zoom. Saturday, September 6th at 11 a.m. ET. If you want to join, make sure you're signed up for my newsletter because that's where I'm going to send the Zoom link so you can attend that. But yeah, it is free. Okay? All right. This Saturday, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. Based. All right. Wanted to make sure I announced that again. And I'll announce it again on Thursday for those who are just joining later. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next story. This is a big one, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So once again, no rest for the wicked. There was something that happened to a St. Louis community years ago, but this story is back in the news and we really got to talk about it, how the U.S. military poisoned a Black neighborhood. And a lot of people don't know about this. This is not the only one. It's not the first time that this has happened. It's happened before, and I'm going to show you other examples. But this particular experiment was a part of the Cold War experiments. And it's not something you're going to learn about in school. It's like they'll teach you about the Cold War. They may teach you about the Tuskegee experiment, but they don't go as far to tell you about all these other experiments that happened here in the United States. So let's go ahead and get into this. This is a big story. It's making the rounds, ladies and gents, and you're going to hear from the residents there. Did the government poison a city? Check this out.
Now to a News Nation exclusive investigation into a secret government experiment that was carried out in St. Louis. Residents tell us they still remember a mysterious fog. Children would run through it. Mothers would try and close their windows against it. For decades, they all had questions, and now we're seeking answers. The United States Army now admits that it sprayed a chemical that contained cadmium, a known carcinogen, on a neighborhood of more than 10,000 people. Critics say this was done with no warning and no consent. Well, tonight we return to the site of that demolished neighborhood and speak with former residents who believe the government turned them into human test subjects. Although the Army admits that the test happened, it is not admitted to harming the residents. News Nation's Natasha Zuvez investigates what was in the fog and why the truth may still be buried.
Now, of course, the Army they're not willing to admit that anyone was harmed, right? Of course, they don't want to admit that.
The fog drifted through the streets like a ghost.
That's exactly what it looked like, a thick fog.
It was summertime and it was hot. We would just run through it as fast as we could and try to just cool ourselves off. It stuck to you.
The spray was so foul as far as the odor. It made some of us have headaches, nausea, dizziness.
That's what I remember. It made me sick.
It wasn't the weather. It was an eerie smoke descending from rooftops, rolling from the backs of trucks.
Regular flatbed truck, but it had a big machine on the back. And it had a big nozzle that really sprayed a fog you couldn't even see through. It was that thick. And it really, we felt it as it would adhere to our skin. And as far as the guys on top of the buildings, they tried to portray them to us as maintenance workers. But we was like, what is a maintenance worker doing? And basically a hazmat suit. And they had masks and goggles.
In the 1950s and 60s, in secret, the U.S. Army sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide into the air of a St. Louis housing project, a largely black neighborhood called Pruitt-Igoe.
Let's pause here for a second. Look at the area that they targeted. Housing projects. So, of course, the majority of the residents that were there were black. And for the white people, and this is something I've said before, white people, poor white people, a lot of these policies, a lot of these things that were done to the black community end up impacting poor white people at some point too. For the poor white people that just happen to live in the area, they were willing to sacrifice you too. They don't give a damn. They're willing to sacrifice you too. Now, why would they do this to this community? Because they don't care. These are the people that we can implement experiments on, because you know what? We don't see them as worthy anyway. They wouldn't do this on a wealthy community. You think they would do this on a white suburban community? No. Look at who they experiment on. And we have more to show about that if we look back in history. But here's the point here, ladies and gentlemen. Check that out. So this is why I've continued to say, poor white people, a lot of these policies, whether it's not implementing universal health care, which, of course, I told you before, one of the reasons they didn't want to do that is because they didn't want black people to have health care. Whether it's Social Security, which was meant to let's put in these limitations so it'll impact black people. These things end up impacting poor white people later on down the road too. So for the few white people that live there, you basically just got caught up in the mix.
It was a lose-lose situation for us in Pruitt-Igoe. We were subjects. We were subjects.
They didn't ask for our permission. We didn't ask for them to spray us. My government used me like I was a guinea pig.
We're standing at where Pruitt-Igoe used to be here in St. Louis, and it's hard to believe more than 10,000 people used to live here. As we bring our drone up, you can see it's mostly just an empty lot now, overgrown with trees. This used to be filled with 33 high-rise buildings. It was all demolished in 1976. And according to the National Research Council, St. Louis was chosen for spraying experiments because it had similar characteristics to Soviet targets like Moscow in terms of population density and terrain and proximity to a river. The government now admits to a secretive series of Cold War tests, including one dubbed large area coverage. More than 30 tests conducted across the U.S. and Canada, spraying zinc cadmium sulfide from planes, rooftops, and vehicles to simulate how a biological attack might spread, all to prepare for potential warfare against the Soviets.
That's why it was the Cold War experiments. So they were willing to sacrifice American people right here in this country. They were willing to sacrifice you guys. Like they don't give a damn. This is why I keep saying the government do not care about you. So obviously, if you're spraying these types of chemicals, what is that going to cause? People are going to have health issues. And I want to point to another example. You see what happened with East Palestine, Ohio? All the chemicals that came from the train derailment. Where was the government? Where was the government? They didn't give a damn. People are still sick in East Palestine, Ohio. But these experiments, this was intentional. We want to conduct an experiment. Let's just find this poor black neighborhood. Let's go target this poor black neighborhood in St. Louis. They're black, who cares? And they're poor. So let's just experiment on them.
Us been in the military and had top secret clearances. We know how it works.
We have died for America. We have fought for America.
You are a veteran.
I am United States Air Force veteran.
Dr. Starks, you're a veteran as well.
Yes, I am. I'm an Air Force veteran also.
Is there a sense of betrayal here?
And I wanted you to hear this part. Some of them are military, they're veterans. And even though they're veterans, it was still the Army who did this to them. They don't give a damn.
Definitely.
They want to know if those secret tests have anything to do with what they're observing with their own eyes.
I lost my two older siblings to cancer. I lost a brother last month.
I've been diagnosed recently with a rare form of lymphoma.
I had cancer of the left kidney, had partial removal of my left kidney.
News Nation reached out to the Army for answers. They provided a one-page response. It says the Army's own Center for Health Promotion and Preventive Medicine investigated in 1994 and found inhalation exposure would not pose a health risk.
So, of course, the Army investigated itself. Oh my God, what could go wrong? People sick, some died. And we talk about the rates of cancer. This is another thing I wanted to mention. Depending on what zip code you live in, I think people need to look this up. In Boston here, for example, if you live in Roxbury, which is right next to the South End, which this part of the South End used to be Roxbury, there's a whole story around this. But the reality is, if you live in the rich side of the South End versus if you live in Roxbury, which is right next to it, your life expectancy drops by 30 years because you live in Roxbury. You're more likely to have higher rates of asthma because you live in Roxbury. And this is a bunch of different things, whether it's these chemicals, whether it's lead, etc. They are poisoning people. Don't you guys think it's a little bit strange? And I said this before, when I was a kid, when it came to cancer, you probably knew like one or two people that maybe had cancer, right? Like now you notice the cancer rates continue to increase, even among healthy people. So there's environmental issues. There's, I believe what I've said before, the food, the chemicals that they spray on our food, but they outright poisoned this community. Now, the U.S. Army says, no, we didn't do that. They don't want to issue any repair. I don't see the U.S. Army saying, oh, let's try to fix this. Let's pay the families or anything. They don't want to pay. They don't want to implement any repair. But they know they poisoned those people.
They also cite later corroborating reviews, including a 1997 review by the National Research Council. Perhaps they assumed we wouldn't read the NRC's 380-page report, but we did, and the Army's statement doesn't show the full picture. In that 1997 review, the National Research Council explicitly says repeated exposure to zinc cadmium sulfide can cause kidney or bone toxicity or lung cancer if levels are high enough. And they admitted they couldn't fully assess the risk. Why? Because some Army records remain classified, it says, for national security reasons. More troubling, key Army exposure records were missing. And when the NRC asked the Army to supply them, the Army said it couldn't find them. Finally, the NRC considered conducting its own study, but concluded it wasn't feasible. In short, it did not test the site, collect samples, or test residents, and they didn't have access to all the data. Their review was based on what the Army gave them, and what the Army either could not find or withheld. The Army ends its statement to News Nation by saying, quote, none of the reports contained evidence of a radioactive component to the zinc cadmium sulfide dispersion test.
Of course, the reports aren't going to say that. You investigate it yourself. But I think the residents of that community, I think they should be able to sue. And I think they need to be paid. I think there needs to be some type of repair that's made here. This is terrible. That's someone's life you're talking about. We're not talking about people got a cough or whatever. Regardless, you shouldn't poison people in the first damn place. But it wouldn't be the first time.
Residents say the secrecy and delays are no accident.
They're waiting us out.
They're waiting on all of us to die.
But that's not even the whole story, as residents demand to know what else could have been in that spray.
They have not come clean with what was in there.
Do you believe that it was just zinc cadmium sulfide in that spray?
No.
No.
We go to the source, a researcher who has spent decades declassifying government documents about these tests. Do you believe the U.S. government sprayed some kind of radioactive material on the residents of St. Louis? I believe that they did. And the government's surprising response to our request to declassify information.
I mean, what the hell?
Plus, renowned activist Erin Brockovich weighs in. Do you think there's been a lie here, a cover-up here?
It sure looks that way.
The residents are asking for an apology from the government for being experimented on. They are asking for compensation, for health studies for themselves and their children. They're also asking for transparency. They want the government to release all the documents about the spraying. So, Elizabeth, tomorrow night on your show, we will go on a journey to try to declassify the one government document that a key researcher tells us she has never been able to expose. And we take the investigation to Erin Brockovich. For the residents still here, still fighting, the question is whether they will get any answers before it's too late. Elizabeth.
Well, they'll have a better chance of it with you on the case. Natasha Zuvez, thank you so much.
This is, you guys, it's not just them, right? This has happened before, and I want to show you other examples. I'm glad that story is back in the limelight, but it also happened in San Francisco. In fact, San Francisco really does need to be the case study for when you look at like some of the things that have happened in other communities in the US. San Francisco needs to be a complete case study. Even when you talk about gentrification, that's one of the things we get into a little bit in the documentary, that you need to look back at what happened to San Francisco, and then you'll understand why things happened in other cities. Similar patterns here, but they were the Cold War experiments. And you can see this here from the San Francisco Press. Cold War scientists push ethical boundaries with radiation experiments. Now, you guys know if you're exposed to a significant amount of radiation, obviously that is going to cause some health issues, like, right? That obviously that makes you high risk there for cancer. But it goes on to say here, the investigative series details how the U.S. Naval Radiological Defense Laboratory, based at the Hunter Point Naval Shipyard in San Francisco, exposed at least 1,073 dockers, military personnel, lab employees, and others to radiation and technical exercises and medical experiments early in the Cold War. So see, it wasn't just St. Louis. This is what I'm saying. It's happened in other places. That was part of those Cold War experiments, but it wasn't the only type of experiment. Now, one of the more ones that you probably heard about was the Tuskegee experiment. This is another example where they experimented on the Black community, in particular Black men, with syphilis. This is another one. We can go back into history. The Tuskegee experiment, the infamous syphilis study. So, and let me tell you how they were sneaky. Okay, let me show you what they did. Check this out. The experiment began in 1932 at a time when there was no known cure for syphilis. This was a contagious venereal disease. After being recruited by the promise of free medical care, 600 African-American men in Macon County, Alabama, were enrolled in the project, which aimed to study the full progression of disease. Listen how they were recruited. The promise of free medical care. So they were sneaky. And then if we go on a little bit more here, the participants were primarily sharecroppers, and many had never before visited a doctor. Doctors from the U.S. Public Health Service, which was running the study, informed the participants, 399 men with latent syphilis, and a control group of 201 others who were free of the disease, they were being treated for bad blood, a term commonly used in the area at the time to refer to a variety of ailments. So, in long story short, they basically gave these men syphilis. Like this is why I've been trying to tell people. They have been doing this. They've been doing these experiments on people. You took sharecroppers, and the sharecroppers, before sharecropping, you were slaves. So these are the freed men that they experimented on. And this is what I mean. Like when I talk about repair that is owed to freedmen in this country, this is what I'm talking about. It's not just about slavery. So you see this. So they tricked these men. And here's a picture of them here. Picture of them here. The men were monitored by health workers, but only given placebos such as aspirin and mineral supplements, despite the fact that penicillin became recommended treatment for syphilis in 1947, some 15 years into the study. So you see this? Want to show you one more part about this as well. In the mid-1960s, PHS, venereal disease investigator, San Francisco named Peter Buxton found out about the Tuskegee experiment and expressed his concerns to his superiors that it was unethical. In response, PHS officials formed a committee to review the study, but ultimately opted to continue it with the goal of tracking the participants until all had died. Autopsies were performed and the project data could be analyzed. So again, and it goes on to say here in 1973, let's pull up here. By the time that the study is shut down, 28 participants had perished from syphilis, 100 more had passed away from related complications, at least 40 spouses had been diagnosed with it, and the disease had been passed to 19 children at birth. In 1973, Congress held hearings on the Tuskegee experiments, and the following year, the study's surviving participants, along with their heirs of those who died, receiving about $10 million out-of-court settlement. Additionally, the new guidelines were issued to protect human subjects in the U.S. government-funded research projects. But they didn't really protect, because here's the thing. We still have issues today. It's not just the dirty water in Flint. I mean, there's a number of ways that the government or the state, the federal government or the state government has poisoned Black communities in this country. There's been different ways that they've done it, whether it's dirty water in Flint or Denmark, South Carolina. It's not just Flint or Jackson, Mississippi. Whether it's Cancer Alley in Louisiana. And you know, it's really interesting because none of these representatives that are from Louisiana, I never hear them talk about Cancer Alley. This was reported by Human Rights Watch. Check this out. The fossil fuel and petrochemical industry in Louisiana area that has come to be known as Cancer Alley has devastated the health, lives, and environment of residents, Human Rights Watch said in a report released today. Cancer Alley refers to approximately an 85-mile stretch of communities along the banks of the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, where communities exist side by side with some 200 fossil fuel and petrochemical operations. There was a 98-page report called We're Dying Here, The Fight for Life in Louisiana Fossil Fuel Sacrifice Zone. Documents how residents in Cancer Alley suffer from extreme effects of extreme pollution from the fossil fuel and petrochemical industry. They face elevated risk of maternal, reproductive, and newborn health, cancer, respiratory ailments. So you see, they just keep poisoning people. And the only person who even had, the only candidate that I saw, that I spoke to as well, that had Cancer Alley on their presidential agenda was Jill Stein. It's a known issue. Mike Johnson, who's Speaker of the House, is from Louisiana. Do you hear Mike Johnson talk about Cancer Alley? Everyone pay attention. This has been going on for quite some time. And so this is another one. Many shared stories of entire communities devastated by cancer, the death of family and friends, missed days of work and school due to illness, and children rushed to emergency rooms suffering from asthma attacks. And this is another thing I've brought up again about the environmental issues in some of these poor or working poor Black neighborhoods, and also not just Black ones, also in Appalachia. You will see this as well. Nobody gives a damn. West Virginia, notorious for this. West Virginia, one of the poorest states in the country. Not healthy. The air is not healthy. So our government and these corporations have a known history of poisoning these communities because they see the people as disposable. This has been a problem. And I'll tell you about another one for the ladies in the chat. There were experiments that were done on female slaves for gynecology. I can't show you the pictures on here. You can Google them when you have time. The tools and the instruments that they used on those women against their will. That's who they used. So ladies, every time you go to the OBGYN, you need to know who they experimented on so that those procedures can be done, so that you can have your pelvic exam. Again, they're not going to tell you about that in history class. They don't go there. When they talk a little bit about slavery, they don't get into the nitty-gritty of it, because if you got into the nitty-gritty of it and you heard about and read and saw the pictures of the horror that took place, I think everybody would be standing up and saying reparations now. They don't tell you about those things. But you can Google it and you can see the pictures. You can see the instruments that they used on those women against their will. When it comes to cervical cancer, for example, Black woman, Henrietta, who's from Baltimore. The reason why people are able to get the treatments that they get and the cells have been studied the way that they are is because Henrietta Lacks had cervical cancer and the doctors took her cells against her will. Now, later on, I believe it was a couple years ago, they tried to compensate the family. There's a whole book about it. Read it. Henrietta Lacks. They've been doing this. So they don't want to cut the fossil fuel industry because there's too much money, too much profits to be made there, but they don't care if your community dies and it's right next to your community. They don't care. That's why there is no, let's be nice to the politicians, let's be civil. There's none of that. No. These people are in bed with corporations. They're in bed with evil people. And there is no rest for the wicked. People talk about this story that was just going around about St. Louis, the chemical exposure there. People are in shock on social media. But it was just a couple years ago that Jordan Sheraton from Status Quo told you about the dirty water in Flint. They've been poisoning people and they still poison people. And I really believe that's why you're seeing an increase in rates of cancer in this country. That's why you're seeing these things. So we got to call it out. And when I talk about pushing back and ways to fight back, when I talk about demands, when I say end the corruption, that's what I'm talking about, end the corruption. And you're not going to end the corruption if you have corporatist shills that are there to benefit the corporations and the military industrial complex. So the politicians aren't going to do anything about this either because they support the MIC. So it's been happening. Those are just some examples. There are others. Monique said they used to spray some black areas in Houston in the 1970s. What'd I tell you? They've been doing this. But if you only focus on class, this is why I keep telling you class and race is connected. Then you hear about these stories and you see these stories. But if you're not going there, and a lot of people don't talk about it, even in the progressive spaces, they don't go into these stories. So people have got to see what is happening, what's been happening to Black communities. And you're going to hear some of this like during the documentary. So my documentary will be released this year before November. I already had the teaser like on my channel. So I already showed you guys the trailer, but people need to know. I've been talking about this. They are poisoning people, your own government. So I'm glad that story is back out there. And I'm glad they had that on News Nation because I feel like it's getting more attention now. And people are starting to dig a little bit deeper and say, oh, what else has happened? You know, no rest for the wicked. Let's get into some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. Wu said they used to spray areas where I grew up, but they said it was for mosquitoes, but I question that. Yeah. I know it's crazy. Thank you, substitute student. There is a plan for humanity and nothing can possibly arrest the working out of that plan. Hashtag ageless wisdom, hashtag Alice Bailey, hashtag Benjamin Cream, hashtag wiki quotes. Shout out to Albino Baby for the super sticker. Thank you. Oh, it's a Ninja Turtle. Heroes in a half shell, turtle power. Itole says Burkina Faso just rejected Bill Gates' genetically modified mosquito program, which was another experiment. There you go. They'll experiment with Black people, especially poor Black people, poor white people. They won't experiment with wealthy neighborhoods. They won't experiment with, the majority of white neighborhoods as well. All right, ladies and gents, if you haven't had a chance to do so, smash the like. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share, just like a Care Bear. Hey, hey, hey. All right, we're diving into the final story of tonight, and this one is going to take probably most of the time. This release here from Whitney Webb. So last time Whitney Webb was on the show, she said she had a new article, another one that was coming out that would implicate someone that is a part of the Donald Trump administration and is also closely connected to Epstein. And apparently, from what I read in this article, also has criminal ties, surprise, and corruption. And this is a big one, folks. We're talking about someone who was a modeling mogul and how he became part of the Trump administration, his connection to Melania and Epstein as well. So get comfortable for this one. It's story time. Again, folks, there is no rest for the wicked. Let's dive into it's the recent article here by Whitney Webb. First Friends, how the first couple's consigliere, I hope I pronounced that correctly, probably not, went from modeling mogul to special envoy. Unlimited Hangout investigates how Paolo Zampali became a recent Trump appointee despite his past of servicing corrupt, predatory, and globalist globalist ambitions, targeting the world's oceans, facilitating fraud, and aiding citizenship by investment scams. The answer appears to lie in Zampali's long-standing ties to the president, his wife, and key conspirators of the Jeffrey Epstein case. This is by Whitney Webb and Mark Goodwin. And here's the picture here. This is Paolo. First Friends. Rich dude, another rich dude. So let's get in here. Zampali is deeply corrupt. From his beginnings as a protege from the controversial modeling mogul John Casablancas, a man known for his appetite for what he called child women, Zampali grew his modeling empire with money from Silvio Berlusconi, the corrupt Italian prime minister, and a close friend of Flavio, who was forced to resign for his sexual escapades with minors while in office. Zampali would later follow Casablanca's example and marry his wife when she was 19, having met her not long after she had flown as an underage teen on Epstein's Lolita Express. So let's dive in here. We're going to get into the story of his beginnings. We'll touch on this a little bit here. So Paolo was born in Milan to an elite family. Now that family became wealthier due to the success of the Italian toy company Harbert, which licensed American toys. After his dad died in a skiing accident, when Zampali was 18, he left college early to take over the company. However, he quickly decided Milan was too small for him and his ambitions. So first and foremost, we have a guy here who already came from an elite wealthy family. So he already started off in, these circles where he was going to be rubbing elbows with probably some corrupt mofos. Let's go on here. As noted in part 1 of this series, Berlusconi, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Berlusconi was a member of the notorious Freemasonic Lodge P2, which was at the heart of the European nexus that united organized crime as well as US and allied intelligence agencies with powerful politicians and business leaders, many of whom were fascist sympathizers. Okay, so right out the gate, we're just going to fast forward because, like I said, we're not going to read the whole article. It is a lot. Right out the gate, we can see that Zampali already has connections with someone who is corrupt and has criminal ties. Right out the gate. Moving on here, it goes on to say, after Berlusconi bought his company, Zampali became involved in the modeling industry. It's not exactly clear how he first got his start in model management, but Zampali himself has hinted that he began with his childhood fascination of John Casablancas, the controversial founder of elite model management. Zampali has claimed to have actually spent vacations with Casablancas when he was a kid, vacationing at his family's home in Ibiza, Spain. I don't know if everyone remembers this, but I remember when I was little, there were these ads for John Casablancas, like elite, modeling management. And that was like a big deal. I think it was called the Look of the Year or contest or something like that. But they used to have the commercials and there were the ads in like the teen magazines as well. I'm not sure if everybody remembers this, but it was a big name at that time. It goes on to say here, let's fast forward. In 1994, Zampali had become the lead organizer of the Look of the Year contest in Ibiza. Now, according to Zampali himself, he was chosen to organize the contest in 1994 because he brought to the table Club Med and Italian TV. Club Med, i.e. Club Mediterranean, was acquired in the 1960s by a group led by Baron Edmund de Rothschild after he visited a required... Oh, sorry, did I skip? Oh, let me go back. This is important. Sorry. Club Mediterranean was acquired in the 1960s by a group led by Baron Edmund de Rothschild. Oh, buddy. After he visited a Club Med in Israel and liked it. Baron Edmund not only paid Club Med debts, but he acquired a 34% stake in the growing tour operator. Joining the French Rothschilds' interest in that group was the Gunsberg family, which at that point had intermarried with organized crime adjacent Brofman family and the Seagrams fame. So again, we are seeing these ties with criminal organized crime. I know. FM said, oh, the Rothschild. I know. Oh my gosh. Let's jump forward here. Jeffrey Epstein, who also entered the world of modeling in the 1990s, was also a reported friend of Zampali's. Now, he was tied to BCCI in the 1980s and some of Epstein's 80s era clients, such as weapons dealer and intelligent asset Adnan Khashoggi. It is unclear how Zampali became connected to Club Med, but his ties with Italian TV were likely related to Silvio, whose assets included numerous Italian television channels and who had been referred to as the father of Italian broadcasting. The annual Look of the Year contest that Zampali organized was put on by Casablanca's elite model management. So you have Zampali here working along with John Casablancas, the guy who said he liked child women. Then it is also alleged in this article that Zampali's wife, before he married her, was already underage on that Epstein jet. See a pattern? Now we go on. However, the elite executive that managed the competitions during the late 1980s and 90s was then the head of the European branch of Elite Models, Gerald Marie. Marie's modeling agency, Paris Planning, had merged with Casablanca's agency in 1986. Marie has since been accused of a litany of sexual assaults and rapes during the 1980s and the 1990s by several well-known and lesser-known models, accusations which have been deemed credible by Marie's wife at the time. So there you go. So these modeling agencies, well, some of these modeling agencies, what I've been gathering from this whole investigation, it sounds like a lot of them were just exploitation. They were exploiting these women and pimping them out is what it also seems like. And it seems like if they weren't willing to do that, then there was sexual assault. Let's jump forward here. So, you know, a little bit about the modeling agencies. They have the video here from Entertainment Tonight, which is the look of the year, which you guys can watch. We'll put the link to the article in the chat. I just can't play Entertainment Tonight on YouTube. Okay. Let's jump forward here. Because like I said, it's a lot of information. So I just kind of want to jump here. Though it is unclear exactly how Zampali first met Trump or who introduced them, it was likely through John Casablancas or another figure at Elite. Casablancas and Trump had been publicly affiliated since the early 1990s. In addition, Casablancas was known to host parties at the notorious nightclub Studio 54, whose co-owner is Ian Schrager. He was the son of an associate of mobster Mayor Lansky, and whose lawyer was also Trump's lawyer and mentor, Roy Cohen. So does everybody see this connection that's happening here with organized crime, the modeling industry, Jeffrey Epstein, Israel, the Rothschilds? It's one big club. And this part here, Studio 54, look, I don't know. I wasn't alive during that time, but it seems like everything happened at Studio 54. If you're watching and you're in the chat and you've ever been to Studio 54, like back in the day, you know, tell me about it. But it seems like a lot of things were happening there. He was also a close associate of New York organized crime interests and served as a lawyer for an infamous mob boss like Tony Salerno. Trump during the 1980s was a regular at Elite Studio 54 events. During this period, Trump had been alleged to have frequently partied with two men in particular, Tom Barack, longtime Trump associate and founder of Colony Capital, who now serves as U.S. ambassador to Turkey, and Jeffrey Epstein, the notorious sex trafficker. Yeah, bud. And then there's the Trump judges elite model girls with John Casablancas. I remember that there. And then I just want to jump forward here. Even though Casablancas had been the apparent impetus for Zampali's move to New York, Zampali didn't work at Elite Models once he was in the US. Instead, he became co-president of Metropolitan Models after purchasing the agency soon after making the move. So Metropolitan Models, the most famous model there was Claudia Schiffer at that time. There's a connection here that is also strange. Claudia Schiffer became engaged to David Copperfield. David Copperfield apparently was also a friend of Zampali's, was also close to Jeffrey Epstein. So there's David Copperfield on that list. All these people connected. Let's fast forward from here because, like I said, it's rather long. Just want to make sure I jump to the next part. Harvey Weinstein does come up in this piece right about here. Zampali himself has an unusual tie to the Weinstein scandal. In 2017, Zampali contacted women he knew had been assaulted by Weinstein, urging them to contact lawyer Benjamin Brafman and file a lawsuit against Weinstein. In an audio recording provided by one of the women in the New York Times, Zampali claims to have had a falling out with Weinstein and that he wanted to bury him, urging the women to file suit against Weinstein. So this is interesting. So Zampali didn't encourage those women to file the suit that Weinstein sexually assaulted them until after he had a falling out with them. Everybody pick up on that? Which tells you that he knew about it prior to that, but didn't seem to want the women to fight against Weinstein until he fell out with Harvey Weinstein. Makes you wonder what else Zampali knew. Goes on to say here, you're going to be represented by the biggest lawyer that existed in U.S. history. They are all these girls. They are getting together and they're being represented by Benjamin Brafman. Zampali said in a recording. Some of the women then went to Brofman's firm where they presented evidence and were asked about their traumatic encounters with Weinstein. However, it turned out that Brofman had actually been hired as Harvey Weinstein's defense lawyer, not as a lawyer for the victims, a move that was publicly announced just weeks later. Zampali called this recording of his conversation urging the victim to contact Brofman as fake news. The modeling mogul. So Zampali's time at Metropolitan Models was cut short in 1997 after he sued his partner, Thomas Zoomer, alleging that corporate funds were missing. So here's a picture of him again here. I got to tell you, when I was reading this article, it really makes me look differently at a lot of those teen magazines I grew up like with and the whole like modeling industry at that point in time. It makes you look at it differently. Fast forwarding here. First of all, the VIPs and Zampali names all have ties to the Epstein-Maxwell network. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton has been extensively linked to Epstein, as well as was known to travel alongside teens on Epstein's jet. Trump, close to Zampali and friendly with his apparent mentor, Casablancas, as well as having once been close to Epstein, has also been accused of inappropriate behavior towards women and models. Trump, after divorcing Marla Maples, dated a woman that had previously accompanied Jeffrey Epstein to the Clinton White House under dubious circumstances, named Selena Middlefart. Guys, I'm sorry. I know I'm being childish here, but we gotta do it. Trump later left Middlefart for one of Zampali's models, Melania Naus. Now, Melania Trump. More on that later, and we're probably going to fast forward to that part in just a second. Okay, as noticed, Epstein's butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, had circled Trump's name in the now infamous Black Book, alleging that he was involved in Epstein's sex crimes in some capacity. Shimon Peres, the former prime minister of Israel, was close to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, and maintained close ties until the death of her sister, Isabel Maxwell. Perez is also the person who introduced Barack to Epstein. According to Barack, through other evidence suggests that Barack and Epstein may have met much earlier. Barack, like Flavio Briatore and Trump, is a circled name in Epstein's Black Book, and other evidence has suggested he was linked to Epstein's illicit activity. In addition, Zampali's claim that his agency finds its models in Brazil is worth examining. Elsewhere, Zampali has suggested that many of the models he recruited from Brazil were teens, which is unsurprising given his emulation of John Casablancas. In one article, Zampali was asked about his most famous former model, current First Lady Melania Trump. He stated that she was mature. She was 24 years old, not like the 14-year-old models from the middle of Brazil. Interesting. Let's fast forward here. I want to get to the Melania part as well. Here's a picture of Jeffrey Epstein and Adriana Ross. Here's another part I want to add. Zampali himself is also alleged to have had a relationship with Epstein prior to becoming infamous, albeit according to controversial author Michael Wolff. However, following Epstein's infamy, Zampali made it clear to the New York Times that he had long known Epstein, claiming that Epstein's recruiters were so rampant in Manhattan, they became known in the modeling and nightclub world as Jeffrey's girls. The extent of the relationship between Zampali and Epstein is unknown, though Zampali clearly swam in similar circles in both the late 1990s and early 2000s. Just going to fast forward here to the Bill Clinton part, I think is important. In addition to his ties to Trump, Briatore, and other Epstein pals of the period, Zampali was close to figures that took infamous flights on Epstein's plane, like billionaire Ron Burkle, former President Bill Clinton, and longtime Clinton advisor Doug Band. Per Zampali, he first met Hillary Clinton at Trump's wedding to Melania after being introduced by her longtime aide, Huma Abedin, whom he claimed to know from events in New York. He claimed to have met Bill Clinton many times before Donald Trump's wedding, apparently alluding to his earlier quote of his modeling company becoming well known among VIPs, including Clinton. However, in 2016, when Hillary Clinton and Trump were both running for president, Zampali told the New York Times that Clinton was not coming to parties with me and the models. Zampali affectionately calls Doug Band Dougie. In 2009 interview, Zampali praised Bill Clinton as a genius and stated he also had much admiration for Hillary. But as you are going to see, something changes because he ended up working with the Trump administration. Let's get to that a little bit more here. Let's do fast forward. Melania. Zampali's most well-known tie to the modeling world is through his connection to Melania Nas, now Melania Trump, Donald Trump's third wife and current first lady. Zampali is known to have been responsible for bringing Melania to the United States to work as a model, later securing her visa. Zampali claims to have discovered Melania at a modeling agency in 1995, and Melania has also stated she first met Zampali that year. She obtained a H-1B visa for skilled workers in October 1996 with his help. However, some reports have cited documents that Melania had done paid modeling work in the U.S. that had been arranged by Zampali's agency before she actually acquired a H-1B visa that allowed her to legally work in the U.S. You don't say. You don't say. Oh, golly. Let's go on more here. At the time, Zampali was still at Metropolitan Models, and he did not create ID Models until 1997. He defended her visa application after scrutiny and accusations that the two ran an escort service in the 1990s. That claim prompted Melania to successfully sue the source of that claim. That was the UK Daily Mail. Zampali is most often cited as the person who introduced Melania to Donald Trump at a 1998 party. This party was hosted at the Kit Kat Club, as both the Trumps and Zampali have publicly made this claim. However, Jeffrey Epstein is also alleged to have claimed that he first introduced the pair. So this is interesting. You got to squint, girls. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's go on here. Now this picture says, and a friend. So that's Donald, Melania, and there's Zampali, but we don't know. This one says a friend. So the woman that is there in that picture. It's hard to know which claim holds more credibility, particularly in an era where powerful people have gone to great lengths to obfuscate their ties or distance themselves from Epstein. However, it is worth noting that it is highly likely that Epstein introduced Trump to his girlfriend prior to Melania, Selena Middelfart, a Norwegian heiress. I'm sorry. That name is cracking me up. I'm sorry. The Middelfart is cracking me up. Trump is said to have brought Middelfart as his date to the Zampali hosted event where he says he met Melania. Prior to dating Trump, Middelfart had accompanied Epstein to the Clinton White House and was also later photographed with Epstein at a 1995 event at Trump Mar-a-Lago at age 22. I'm sorry, I can't hold it in. I can't hold it in. The name is killing me. We got to drop the beat. Dance with me. Dance with me. Drop the beat. In the street. I'm sorry, guys. I can't do it. It's too much. I know I'm being silly, but it's too much. Okay. Evidence presented at Ghislaine Maxwell trial revealed that Middlefart had been one of Epstein's girls in the 1990s, with her relationship overlapping with other Epstein girlfriends of that era. After dating Epstein, Middlefart began dating Trump. In addition, it seems that Melania may have had more interactions with Epstein than those confirmed by a handful of now well-known photographs. For instance, Melania had her contact information listed in his black book, though it appears under the entry for her now husband, Donald Trump. Notably, the circled black book entry for Trump only lists one email address, which was Melania's then personal email address, which is listed right there. 3 numbers for Melania, misspelled Melania, are also listed. Man, back in the day when people had AOL, teaming up with Trump. After failing to obtain the Casablancas founded elite model management in 2004, Zampali was hired by his friend of roughly 10 years, Donald Trump. However, the possibility of working with Trump had come up a year prior, in November 2003, when Trump and Zampali flew on a private plane together from Palm Beach to New York. A week later, per The Observer, the possibility of a job was again floated during a dinner at Cipriani's that was attended by Trump, Melania, Trump, Zampali, and the aforementioned magician David Copperfield. So this is Zampali remembering. We had dinner together at the Victoria's Secret show with David Copperfield, and we talked about it over dinner, and I said, yes, I want to do it. Then 3 months later, I started to get the classes, the license, the school at NYU where I took the test to be a realtor. In a separate interview, Zampali stated that Trump had told him the following at dinner: if you lose your supermodel, you go out of business. But if I lose my superintendent, I have 1,000 looking for that job the next day. Paolo, you are too good for the fashion industry. You should come work with me. So this is how Zampali gets aligned with Donald Trump. Zampali got the official "you're hired" from the star of the reality TV series The Apprentice following his failed bid for Elite. He began working as a director of international development for the Trump organization. Okay, so he's a part of the Trump administration, so you got to know he started working with him prior to Donald Trump's presidential run. So this is someone who has known him for a long time. Fast forward. So there he is there standing in front of like the Trump plane. But he found working for Trump more difficult than he anticipated. He told The Observer that to get a girl from the middle of Brazil that doesn't speak English and put her on the cover of Vogue is very different than building skyscrapers in Manhattan. He also said that Trump was a tough boss. Okay. So he eventually left the Trump organization in 2006 and started his own real estate firm. Fast forwarding here. There's the BBC interview. And we're just going to jump forward. I'm telling you that the article is really long, but certain parts that I want to mention here. An unlikely diplomat. Sometime between 2006 and 2007, Zampali formally left the modeling and real estate industries to work with the United Nations. This is very troubling, you guys. Someone that had these types of ties went on to work for the UN. In a 2009 interview with Diario de Ibiza, Zampali explained his reasoning as deciding to change things up and do business with projects that he identified more with, right? So let's get to the part. There he is with Ted Turner. Yeah, that's Ted Turner. Let's see some more of these pictures. You see all the powerful people he was around? United Nations. I don't know what happened there. Let me go back. Okay. So connection with Naomi Campbell. Grenada's UN ambassador, Angus Friday, was in attendance with the article, making note that only a week prior, he had personally squired Naomi Campbell through the UN building. So you see everybody starting to connect. But let's jump forward when he started to get into the political space here. And by the way, one thing I want to point out about Zampali, which I think you guys need to understand, the Epstein-Clinton relationship. Zampali was bipartisan. I mean, he had a relationship with Republicans. He had a relationship with Democrats, different people. So just keep that in mind, as you'll see it here. In addition to the ties detailed above the show, Zampali's work at the UN intersected with the Clinton philanthropies. There is more to discuss regarding Zampali and other aspects of the Epstein-Clinton relationship. As mentioned before, Zampali was appointed minister counselor to the permanent mission of the Commonwealth of Dominica in 2011. Zampali first became connected to Dominica's government via his ties to real estate. It goes on to say here, it's just insane that like this guy was all up in the UN and everything. He had his hands in some of everything. Let's jump forward to, I'm trying to get to the Trump political piece here. That's still Dominica. It's towards the end. Sorry, guys. It is a long article. I tell yourself, like, if you have like a Saturday just chilling by yourself, grab you coffee, tea, sit down and just read this bad boy. It's a lot of information, but it's interesting. There was also the Watto scandal at the UN. Zampali's deep involvement with SDG 14 would bring him to the forefront of a major UN scandal. Remarkably, Zampali managed to avoid any repercussions at all for his involvement, despite the fact that the available evidence directly contradicts his claims about the case. Yeah, this was the scandal that broke in 2022. The UN official then at the UN Office of Project Services was revealed to have suspiciously steered 58 million of UN OPS funds to a British businessman merely after meeting him at a party, who brokered the introduction between the two men, ? That was Zampali. And then we get to the Trump administration. Zampali goes to Washington. When Trump launched his 2016 presidential campaign, Zampali had a chance to gain access to a whole new tier of power players outside of the UN. After Trump's defeat of Hillary Clinton, Zampali was one of the most high-profile Italians invited to the Ritzis of inaugural parties and balls. He even co-organized an inauguration party for Trump with the magazine Forbes. It goes on to say the guest of honor was Sylvester Stallone, who previously engaged to one of Zampali's former models and model brokers, Angela Everhart. You know what? I wonder what some of these models have to say. Like some of the ones that are retired from the industry. Like when I was growing up, we had supermodels. Like it's not like that anymore. But when I was growing up, there were supermodels. So I'm wondering what some of them, if they could talk, what they would say. Makes you wonder. Here we go. Zampali's statement suggests that someone at one of these organizations sent the Serbian government minister to Zampali to discuss counterterrorism and defense tech. This would foreshadow Zampali's later focus when appointed special envoy for global partnerships under the second Trump administration. In 2020, Zampali decided to move from New York City to DC to be closer to Trump. Zampali blended in poorly with DC elites who found his tastes garish and the guests he would entertain questionable. Politico noted that these questionable figures were lobbyists. Goes on to say here, there he is with Dr. Fauci. That's how connected this guy was. There he is with Dr. Fauci. Well. Oh my gosh. So it goes on to say they get into Brock Pierce, also another billionaire. That's Brock Pierce right there in the middle. Brock Pierce apparently also, according to this article, had ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Wow. This is just, boy, I tell you. Oh my God. 2021, Zampali threw a party for Pierce at his mansion in DC, in which Pierce infamously taught the party goers how NFTs work by setting fire to an expansive painting hanging on Zampali's wall. Goes on here to say, yeah, and there's Brock Pierce again, right there. Brock Pierce was, for those who don't know, Brock Pierce was a child actor. He later went on to become a billionaire. For those who are not aware, he's into like that crypto, like one of those big crypto guys. 2021 of July, Zampali forwarded a series of text messages to a dozen DC lobbyists, business owners, and other power players in DC that included screen grabs of exchanges between himself and a woman in which he described his sexual encounters with her in graphic detail. Zampali described the woman as a working girl. Get it? Working girl. So, i.e. prostitute. However, Zampali later said that he did not pay her for sex, and several sources claimed that the woman was not, in fact, a prostitute. Please stay away from my family. You are a pro. All city knows you are a working girl. Since day one, you said I had to pay you. So now we're hearing about prostitutes, and then we get into Zampali's new role. Zampali would again make a political comeback with Trump's return to the White House after winning the 2024 presidential election. He again participated in several prominent inaugural events. So here we see him making a comeback here. And that's Flavio there. That was there as well. And it says he started meeting with top politicians in Italy, like Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and her deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini. Who else did he start to meet with here? Zampali was one of the earliest figures in the new administration to push Italy's Meloni to advocate 5% of Italian GDP to defense spending. Highlight defense. So another thing, big defense guy. Wait till you see the other part. This part right here, let me highlight. Zampali also called for Italian company Leonardo, part of the GCAP, to become a European leader in supplies for American Iron Dome. Everybody hear that? When you hear Trump talk about this golden dome, which he just talked about in the recent press conference, guess where that came from? Zampali. He called for, again, an American Iron Dome, i.e. the Golden Dome, stating that such systems are necessary to counter the risk of attack with much more advanced launchers than those launched by Iran against the Jewish state. I know. Oh my days. Oh my days said, oh my gosh, this is too much. I know. It's a lot. It is a lot, guys. And then wait till you hear about the more recent thing that just happened. So I think you guys get the gist of it. This guy is corrupt. Corrupt, has ties to organized crime. And I don't want to give, again, not too much away because I do want you to read the article. And then there's Zampali presents Trump with a replica of the Patriot token statue, right? So all these people run together. Now, let me show you something else. Eric, if you could put the link to that article in the chat for the peeps. There's something else about Zampali. And Whitney Webb called it out on X. The plan to turn Gaza into an ethnically cleansed Riviera of the Middle East appears to go back almost a decade to 2016, when Zampali, the man who says he introduced Trump to Melania and who is now his special envoy for global partnerships, was pitching it to journalists and politicians alike. Pause. So what you see, the Golden Dome that Trump has been talking about, came from Zampali. And this Trump Gaza Riviera also came from Zampali. And they've been talking about this for years. You heard what she said. It goes back to 2016. So if they talked about it in 2016, don't forget that's obviously long before October 7th. What I'm trying to tell you is this was always the plan. So regardless if the attack happened on October 7th or not, they already had a plan to take the land. Pass it on to your friends. It goes on here too as well. She talked about the investigation, the article that we're reading, and she's referring to this that was shared by Hala. Trump's team is circulating a 38-page Great Trust Plan for Gaza. It envisions a U.S.-run trusteeship for 10 years, turning the strip into Riviera of the Middle East. The catch, it begins with voluntary relocation of 2 million Palestinians, genocide packaged as real estate. And this is what we were talking about. See? After they destroy the land, get them out of there, and then they take it, and then they rebuild. That's what they're doing. And here's another one here. So you can see they got a whole plan for this. But now you know that Zampali, this was going to happen regardless. It was going to happen regardless. Now I have to get to this here because let me just go back to my thing here. I want to show you this woman. She went viral with this video, but I just want to show you a small piece of what she said about this Gaza plan that I think people probably need to pay attention to, because get it right about there. Check this out. Has anybody started asking this question? Listen to this. Oh, sorry, guys. It's Twitter videos. It's a longer video, but I just want to get it to this one part here.
A modern reformation of chattel slavery, okay? Some are going to concentration camps, and I guarantee you they're going to try to use slave labor over in that place that does not belong to them people to build another nation yet again. They're going to do the same shit that they did to build the United States.
Did you hear what she said? Yeah. Who do you think is going to build that Gaza Riviera? That's why I continue to call it not just a genocide, but a colonial project. And Zampali, Zahubi, whatever the hell you want to call this guy, Zampali, this guy, see, now you guys know who was behind the Golden Dome. That was him. Now you know who's behind, who had supported this Gaza Riviera style going back to 2016. That was him. And again, the article's really long. Please spend some time reading it on your own. But I wanted to highlight really important points because I need to prove a point. For all the Zionists who continue to say this all started on October 7th, for all the Zionists who continue to say that Hamas started this, what this article about Zampali shows you is not just his connection to Epstein and Donald Trump and that he's corrupt and his connection to organized crime and all that jazz. It shows you that they had already planned back in 2016 to take the land. And by they, I mean Zampali and Trump. And now we're putting all these pieces together. And remember that article that came out that said that Israel knew about the plans for Hamas a year and a half in advance and decided not to act on it because they didn't think it was going to happen? It almost seems like this was planned. There's a lot of corrupt people, folks. A lot of corruption. And Whitney's one of those people that calls out that corruption. And so I hope Eric had put that link to the article in the chat for you guys so you can read it on your own. Maybe he did earlier, I don't know. But I'm just here to tell you guys, this is why I keep saying all these people out here talking about this foolishness. This is why I keep, if you are not challenging or calling out power, I look at them suspiciously. I really do. People trying to get you to focus on everything except for the powerful, the corrupt, and the billionaires. And that's what people got to bring their attention back to. Because then when you do that, then you'll realize, hey, that's who we need to be fighting back against. But people got you looking every other way. And I'm trying to tell you, no matter what you do outside of that bubble, as long as you have those corrupt people pulling the strings, they're just pulling people like puppets, you're still going to run into the same issues. A lot of people want to talk about everything else, but they don't want to talk about corruption. There's no rest for the wicked. These people are always going, they're always thinking. And it's like the enemy is always coming up with another plan. The moment you sit down, the moment you decide, all right, I'm just chilling, no big deal, the enemy is already playing something else. So I think that's a big part. Eureka said exactly, Sabrina, exactly. Yeah, this is a big part of it. But you got people having you focusing on everything else except for corruption. And it may get clicks, it may get views, etc. But is it changing anything? I think this is a big part of the problem. So these people are very powerful and they run in powerful circles. And this is why I really think, this is why I push dual power. This is why I say we are going to be emboldened by establishing dual power systems, by building up mutual aid systems, by organizing with our communities. That's what's going to make us feel empowered. But right now, you got people out here telling you what's going to make you feel empowered is who you vote for. That's not going to make you feel empowered. All these people are corrupt. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you can move on with something else. That's the part a lot of people don't want to tell you. And they don't want to tell you because it hurts their bank account. But they know it just like I do. They know these people, they're all corrupt. They're corrupt. And it's not just Trump. I mean, like they mentioned the Clintons, it's bipartisan. Corruption is bipartisan. So shout out to Whitney Webb for unveiling that again. I didn't even know who that guy was. You see how the people who really be pulling strings are kind of in the background a little bit? You see JD Vance, you see Kash Patel, you see, what's her name? Caroline, Levi, whatever the fuck. You see Caroline, you see Pam Bondi. You don't see this motherfucker. Those the people you got to be looking for. Interesting stuff. Jimmy Zimzam says Whitney Webb. Yeah, Whitney Webb, she really they knocked it out of the park with this one. I'm like, people will know who he is now. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Wasim. The same Tom Barak who apologized to the Lebanese media after calling them animalistic and that they are the problem in Maine. Oh, in the Middle East. Interesting. Shout out to Eric Hatchett for the super sticker. Thank you, Eric. Whoop, whoop. Thank you, Kenman. I can't hold in my middle fart either. Oh my God, that name. Oh my God. JD said middle fart, let it rip. Thank you, Resurrect. Iron Dome was no match for Persia Gold Dome. Trash. And thank you, Chima. Westerners do not like to challenge the powerful. Instead, they blame poor people, refugees, migrants, and people of color. Chima, chima, chima. Telling you, people got you looking everywhere else. Everywhere else. Texas Grown said the devil's in the deception. Yeah. And here's how Whitney Webb can do this, right? Whitney Webb isn't attached to either party. That's why she easily can call out corruption on both sides. You know? Oh, we got a poll. Let's look at the poll. I forgot about that. Yeah. Let's see what people think. Thank you so much for the poll, ladies and gents. Wow, this is close. We got a tie. Do you think Trump will serve a full term? 2,704 votes. 33% say yes, he will stick it out. 28% say hell no. 28% say I'm not sure. And 11% say maybe. Wow. That's a close poll. That is interesting. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave. Consigliere, thank you. You would have figured it out. Good that Whitney Webb finds and lays out all this. Testify. Yeah, man. This is what we gotta start paying attention to more. And this is something, I want to continue to promote, particularly on this show. The people who are calling out the corruption. Because that's ultimately what got a lot of us in this situation to begin with. Just corruption, corrupt people and corrupt governments, corrupt businesses, that type of thing. And thank you so much for the super sticker, Jehovah Vasanas. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, guys. Again, if you're not signed up for my Substack, the links are in the description of this video, this live stream. Sign up for my Substack if you want to go to the virtual mutual aid workshop, because I am going to send the Zoom link via the newsletter, just like I did last time. So make sure you're signed up for that. I'll remind you guys again on Thursday, but I'll send that newsletter out tomorrow, and then I'll send it again on Friday. Yeah, I'll send it out tomorrow and I'll send it again on Friday. I don't like sending people too much stuff back to back. All righty. That is it for me tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for hanging out for me. And remember, there is no rest for the wicked. No rest for the wicked. Have a good night and keep up the fight. Middle fart.